So we're certainly fitting into the national agenda of AAMC with this conference, and I really thank the regional group of Northeast taking a lead on this by having this special interest group. So Janine, you want to do a quick welcome?
Yeah, thank you so much, Alice. I'm Janine Shapiro. It's really my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual conference on health humanities as a teaching and learning strategy. I'm chair of the NEGA region, and it's just so wonderful to be able to host this first virtual conference. Like many of you on this conference, we were very saddened to cancel our NEGA annual conference in Vermont last month. So I'm very happy with a quick turnaround and with the incredible work of Alice and Leah Holterman and her wonderful planning committee for turning this pre-conference that we had planned on April 30th into this virtual conference in May. So thank you for the amazing work that you have done and all the efforts, and to all the conference presenters for coming together also on short notice. So enjoy the afternoon, enjoy the learning, and thank you to Lisa for starting us on this wonderful slideshow. Have a great time this afternoon. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot myself, and hope you do as well. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to go now to our first presentation. We're exactly on time by 1 minute off. And we're starting with visual thinking strategies for medical educators, and Margaret Chisholm is the first speaker.
Hello. So welcome everybody. Thank you, Alice, for inviting me. In a few moments, we're going to experience a visual thinking strategies session together. VTS is a pedagogic method that facilitates close looking and open discussions of art. It was developed by Philip Yenawine and Abigail Husin, and VTS has been used, studied, and refined over the past 30 years with all levels of learners, from pre-K to adult, and more recently, health professions learners. So this is what a VTS session looks like in a museum. This is the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, which is the site of the Harvard Macy Institute Art Museum-based Health Professions Education Fellowship, which I completed last year, along with some of you participants I see. There were 11 other clinical educators from around the world there. So VTS sessions usually last about 20 to 30 minutes. So we're just going to get a taste today, a 10-minute taste of a session, and I'm going to explain the process right now. So VTS really involves 3 questions. There's an opening question, and then there's 2 other questions that I'll toggle back and forth between. It's really a series of dialogues with individual participants and myself, the facilitator. So what we're going to do is, if you want to respond to one of the questions and enter into a dialogue, you'll need to type your full name in the chat, and then Margot Kelly Hedrick, who's my research program coordinator, soon to be a Duke Medical School student, is going to call on you. And when she calls on you by name, you'll unmute yourself, and then then you and I will engage in a conversation, and then we'll probably have time for about a handful or so of these conversations, and at which point there'll be a little wrap up and then a Q&A. So with no further ado, we're going to move to the first piece that we're going to be discussing. And what I want you to do is take a few minutes to silently look at this image and think to yourself, what's going on in this picture? So what's going on in this picture?
Kenneth McGinnis. can unmute yourself and speak up.
You can unmute yourself, Kenneth, to answer the question.
So I had two thoughts. One, the first thing was that she was about to give birth in the pool. The second thing is I felt there was a transition between states of like all the same person in different states. I don't know. I'm not sure which state.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that first you're drawn to this central figure here, who to you looks like she's going to give birth, and you're saying that she might be standing in a pool and kind of putting that into a story, thinking maybe she's about to give birth in this pool. And then you're looking, I think what you were talking about, these other figures, and wondering if there's a relationship between this figure and these other figures. Did I get
Yes,
that?
I was thinking, my thought was that they are all the same person, but at a different state and time of their life. But
So this
it
person
seems,
might be related.
zooming in doesn't seem like it, no.
Okay. What more can we find?
Thank you for sharing, Kevin. Kenneth, I'm sorry, Kenneth.
Thanks for the opportunity.
I'll take a stab. Something very special happening or about to happen, I think, signified by the beams of light. Most of the picture is in the dark, and then this woman who is specifically wearing a white dress and the reflection off the pool. So there's something very, you could say life-giving, I suppose, or focusing in any case.
Okay, so, Robin, so you're again looking at this figure that Kenneth was looking at, this central figure, and drawing our attention to this figure, suggesting, something special is going to be happening here. And one of the clues that you have to something being special are these rays of light coming in that are shining in a somewhat ethereal way on this figure. Maybe making it seem more special than normal, compared to especially all this other darkness in the background of the image. What more can we find?
Megan Bowler, you want to unmute yourself, speak up?
Thank you. I was going to comment that it seems like it's a hot summer day. Everyone's kind of wearing summer clothing, the sleeveless dress, the shorts with no shirt. And I'm just kind of reminded of the experience of like living in the South or being in a hot climate and trying to cool off in the middle of summer. And I was also really moved by the comment just before being called on myself, the person who was talking about the rays of light connoting a kind of specialness. And suddenly I found myself thinking about that too, and the kind of the idea almost of like a kind of holiness, around a kind of imminent birth or the presence of a child about to be born. So for me, all of a sudden there were some sort of art historical connections there too.
Okay, so you're looking at the way the figures are dressed, and suggesting that the way they're dressed might suggest the season of the year, that this might be summer because this person's not wearing a shirt and they're in shorts, and she's in a sleeveless dress and short sleeves here. And then you're also thinking about what was said previously about these rays of light and how this might be something special, and you're connecting it to knowledge that you have about other special births, and on their connections of the images of special births in other works of art. What more can we find?
Mary Gurney.
Okay. Actually, both of the two previous speakers identified things that I did. But one of the other things is that this reminds me of the street that I grew up on, or the street that my cousins grew up on, and how the houses are set, and that this is set in a potentially a lower socioeconomic area that might be struggling, and that's why the pool's out, the water hose, and everybody's trying to cool off.
Okay, so you're connecting this to setting, and I think Megan had just mentioned, I think it was Megan, that this might be in the south, and you're connecting it to not only a setting that you're familiar with, but also one that is associated with maybe some lower socioeconomic status among the dwellers here. And some of the evidence you have for that is this pool that's in the front yard and that people are trying to cool off in. What other evidence do you see? What else do you see that makes you say that this is maybe a lower socioeconomic status home?
I think for me, it looks like the red house next to it is being kept up. This one is this white house that they're all in front of, might need some work. And that the fact, you know, granddad is, I'm a granddad because that's what it looks like for me. His granddad is asleep on the lawn trying to keep. Mom is trying to help her stay cool.
Okay, so you're suggesting that maybe there's something in this home especially, that looks like it might be in a state of a little disrepair. And then you're also connecting these figures and thinking about the relationships between them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're imagining that this might be the father and this might be the mother helping keep this figure cool.
Mm-hmm.
Good. What more can we find? I think we have time for one more.
Philip, there's two.
Thank you very much. The homes, they look like they were built in the late 60s to early 70s, and the scene itself looks like twilight in a semi-rural space, most likely in the late 80s to early 90s. This is due to not only the couch that we can see through the door in the window, but also the pavement that is behind the what looks like to be a van. The couch style itself is very reminiscent of something that was built in a time frame, most likely something that was inherited. Also, given the situation that we see with how the lighting is, and also how there is not only light inside in the middle, we have more stronger light on the right, kind of illuminating the figures, and darkness upon the left, which, given how it looks, this could be very much something like a setting sun type situation, or maybe even some light through the trees, depending upon how dense the forestry is.
We just lost the image. Hold on. Go back.
We're going to have to finish up in a minute anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, so just to kind of summarize what you said, you're really focused on setting and thinking about not only the time of day, but also the place, and thinking about this as a setting that's in around twilight, and you give evidence for that in this the light that's coming here, the light in the trees, the shadows, and these rays. And then you're thinking about the time in the terms of decades, and maybe the 80s, and the evidence is these kind of the age of the cars and the couch. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide and just to reflect for a moment on what this method asks of you and how it might be relevant to medical education and practice, and to say that there is evidence that that the visual thinking strategies method of discussion does enhance close observation, reasoning with evidence, and these other clinically relevant skills. And then I'll open it up if we do have any time for questions.
We have 1 minute for questions. So if anybody would like one question, we can manage.
Can you tell us the name of this piece?
Oh, what I'll do is I'll drop it in the chat for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Good question.
So she'll put the name and the artist in the chat. How is that for everybody? Okay, so I think to stay on time in the beginning at least, is there anybody who's exploding with a question?
So I have a question. First, thank you for the short exercise. Two, what were you expecting our responses to be?
Oh, I really didn't have any expectation. Every group is different in terms of what they bring to their observations, the things that they focus on. So really no expectations for the process other than to see what everybody's perspectives are on what the meaning of this and what the significance of this might be.
So
How
I
are
just
we
want,
supposed to learn? Is that the
Pardon?
so what is the learning point of this? Is this to hear others' way of thinking, others' perspective, and to put it in a frame of mind where everyone has an opportunity to express themselves?
Yeah, I think if we had 30 minutes or so for a full conversation, you would see that other people are bringing different kinds of evidence in to support their interpretations, and you might revise your ideas. You might develop sort of a appreciation for multiple perspectives. You might be able to tolerate the fact that there's not a right or wrong answer. How are these figures related? Some people might think they're part of the same family. Other people might think they're aspects of the same self. That kind of those kinds of skills in terms of tolerating ambiguity, being able to problem solve, and to develop respect for multiple perspectives, I think were the main things out of this discussion that I saw.
anyway, I'm going to have to cut her short. I'm sorry. I know Meg has a wealth of knowledge. So I've asked every speaker to put their name and email on their last slide. So if you want to correspond with that speaker, you will be able to do that individually, as well as if you want a copy of their PowerPoint, you'd have to ask them individually because I've not gotten all the PowerPoints or agreed to distribute them. So that is why every speaker on the last slide has their name and email for you to be able to contact them directly. I think that was the best system I could come up with, so I hope you are okay with that. And this is a wonderful introduction to start this way, so thank you, Meg. And this is a whole field in itself. We could spend 2 days talking about visual thinking strategies, or I could spend a lifetime maybe. Okay, educating faculty, visual arts as a tool. Rachel Dubroff is coming up from Weill Cornell Medical College. And nice to meet you, Rachel.
Hello. I'm just pulling up my...
Turn your volume up a drop for us, maybe.
Me? Can you hear me?
I think so.
Yeah? Okay.
Put it on slideshow and I think we're good.
Okay.
You're a bit far away, but it's still audible in my end.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Rachel Dubroff. I'm a hospital medicine attending and assistant professor at Cornell, and I'm going to be talking about a faculty development program that I designed along with my colleague Kimberly Bloom-Feshbach, and that we ran over the past couple of years. So I think it was great to have Meg kind of lead up to me, because I think that was a wonderful introduction to some of what we can do with the visual arts. And I'm sure that many of you, since you're on this session, are aware of all the literature out there surrounding the use of visual arts in medical education. What value does it bring to medical education? We know that it improves learners' observational skills, it can inspire reflective thinking and reflection, it can facilitate teamwork and communication. I published a piece with my colleagues looking at medical students and examining their awareness of the subjectivity and uncertainty of perception, in which we found that it increased with visual arts work, along with the recognition of multiple points of view. We also found in that study that our visual arts teaching, which is done sort of in a museum-based place rather than virtually, which may be what it will be moving forward, also served as a very important sort of sanctuary for our students and was a place that they found restoration and connection to their colleagues. So one of the weaknesses, I think, and there are many, I think, with the literature out there, a lot of it is short term. We don't have clinical outcomes data. We don't know what happens to these students years into the future when they're practicing. And also primarily the visual arts is used with our undergraduate and graduate medical learners. And sometimes faculty are included, but not often that I've seen are faculty using this work alone. So Kim and I were very excited to try something with visual arts exclusively designed for faculty. So at Cornell, we're very lucky that we have a unique program called the Hospital Medicine Clinical Scholars Program. It's a select group of physicians who have completed their training and are attending and are particularly interested in becoming academic leaders in hospital medicine. So it goes against the assumption that I think is often made in medicine, which is that we're all ready to be clinical educators and master diagnosticians when we finish our training. We're not. And this program serves to give a lot more education to these learners who are motivated to do it. So they work on clinical teaching skills, medical ethics, peer coaching, resiliency training. And we thought, what a great group of learners if we can bring them over to the visual arts, introduce them to it if they haven't already experienced it, and kind of see what happens. So we developed a program which we entitled Clinical Teaching, Visual Arts as a Tool. We wanted to introduce visual arts and medical education to our clinical scholars as a means of faculty development, both to sort of explore what their responses were and to help them facilitate potentially using this work as their careers move forward. The objectives of the program were wide, and admittedly, a lot of what we wanted to do was just expose them to this work. So we wanted them to understand observation and inferences. We wanted them to understand that people have emotional reactions to stimuli, whether they be visual or otherwise. We wanted to think about using art to explore biases. We wanted to talk about multiple perspectives and how that recognizing that could impact our team dynamics in the hospital. And we wanted to give them exposure to this work so that they could use it sort of as a reflective practice, both for themselves and potentially for their learners. So the design of the program was that we had 1 2-hour session in the Met that I designed and taught, in which the participants participated in 5 or 6 specific exercises with pieces of art in the museum that were solely focused on them, very active participation types of exercises, and I'm going to show you guys a couple examples of that. We then did a debrief moderated by Kimberly, who has communications expertise, and we touched on sort of what happened at the museum, how do we use this pedagogical methodology, the humanities in medical education, and we gave them an opportunity to reflect on the experience and how it might impact them moving forward. So this is an example of one of the exercises we do, which is adapted from a paper that I published in 2018 and was designed by a colleague, Anna William, who is an art educator that I've worked with in the past, and it's called Sketching in the Round. We have the participants circle around this sculpture, do a 90-second sketch. That's what they think is gonna happen, and then I say, drop your sketchbook and rotate counterclockwise. So they pick up the sketchbook of the person to their left, keep sketching for 90 seconds, and repeat until they've gone all around the circle. So not only does this exercise highlight the importance of sort of the physical aspect of point of view, but also the subjectivity of point of view. So they're picking up a sketch that someone else was working on and saying, wait, they're noticing this part. I didn't even notice that. And now I'm looking at that because they saw it. So it can be both sort of very, very, very subjective. Another exercise that we use is to explore sort of emotional reactions and associations. So I just asked them to look at this fragment of Queen's face from Amarna. And do you like it or not, and why? And I think it both sort of allows individuals to explore themselves, but then they learn more hearing their colleagues' reactions as well. So how did we assess the program? We did a pre-session survey anonymously to capture prior humanities experience and cohort data. We did a post-session survey recording their experience, interest in continuing, whether they would recommend it to a colleague, ideas for future applications. We also had a research assistant who was with us who took field notes throughout. So we did have offered this twice in 2018 and 19. We had 15 participants, the clinical scholars, and some other interested faculty over those 2 years. Only 1 participant actually had any visual arts exposure in their either sort of college or beyond prior. So, which was surprising to me, frankly, that none had experienced this except this one in medical school and residency. And admittedly, all of our learners were open to this. They all expressed the belief that this type of work likely had a role to play in medical education. After the session, they across the board said every resident should get this training. Most would recommend their colleagues also get the training. Most wanted to continue doing more of this training, and all enjoyed it. But how could they not? We were at the Met for 2 hours. and then went out for a glass of wine and discussed it. So I don't know who wouldn't enjoy that. So one of the most interesting outcomes to me, I think, was that the themes that came up in our sort of field notes, more open-ended questions that we asked our participants, were the same themes that we see with our medical students. Thinking about observation, thinking about others' perspectives, thinking about emotional reactions, feeling the sense of sanctuary in the moment, in the session. But the way these themes came out with our learners and how they would apply them were very, very different. So with my students, they're generally talking about, I'm going to look at a patient differently. I'm going to spend more time seeing something. I'm going to think about my patient's perspective. From these learners, what did I hear about? I heard about, I'm going to think about what the nurse is thinking. I'm going to think about what the surgical consultant is thinking. One of them said, it's hard as you get farther away, but I want to keep in mind my resident's perspective. What is my intern thinking when I'm talking to them? And then we talked about sort of emotional reactions to things. And again, with my student learners, it's often emotional reactions to a patient. But with my colleagues, we had a discussion of like, why do I hate procalcitonin so much? What is that? And I think we all could talk about, there's a specific lab that we just don't like, why, very different for different people. But I just found that, again, the themes were the same, but the way the themes came out and were applied was very different for this stage of learner. So looking at the program, I think from what I've seen, it was a novel focus on faculty development. We did a mixed methods evaluation. The limitations were that it is a small sample size, and we do admittedly have a very unique circumstance where we have a visual arts educator and this clinical scholars program with people who are very interested in becoming kind of expert clinicians and teachers. I think that there are many interesting future directions that this work could take. We definitely want to build the program out more with more sessions, more exercises, and involve faculty potentially from other institutions. I think that we are going to pivot to a virtual platform, at least for the coming year, in response to COVID-19. But I think one of the benefits of this is that it will allow more participation. It will allow people to say, okay, I wouldn't make it to the Met at 4 o'clock for this session, but I'm gonna be able to open my computer because I just finished my notes at the hospital and I can do it there. We wanna mentor faculty to incorporate this into what their already existing teaching responsibilities are. So many of them are, have groups of residents on rounds. I can observe them virtually doing this work. They can observe me virtually do it, and then I can observe them and give feedback. They can sort of build it into their skill set. And another potential, and again, I think the virtual aspect moving forward may help this, is to involve and incorporate patients and make this sort of a collaborative experience. So that's it. I just want to say a special thank you to Deanna Janat-Ka, who was helped us do assessment, my longstanding colleagues, Carol Capello, Deepu Gowda, and Anna William, who I've done previous work with medical students with, and my section chief, Arthur Evans, who's always supportive of my work. I think we have time for some questions. I can't hear, sorry.
Alice, you're on mute.
Okay, this is Elizabeth Cater. In the meantime, I was wondering, with the current distancing issues, have you considered doing it online? It would also provide an opportunity for many, many more people to join in.
Right, I think that's what I was referring to when I was saying virtually. So I'm also on a leadership group of a virtual care team that we've started at Cornell, where we do a lot of our actually in-hospital work in support of our redeployed faculty online. So we have a very, very built-in technological platform. All of our patients have iPads in the hospital. We can do this with patients. We can do it with other faculty. So yes, that's what I meant when I said virtually.
I just want to say that the chat has a lot of interesting comments that if you have time, you should read a little bit. And people are tweeting out about this. The more tweeting on this, the better it is. What can I tell you? I love the tweet world. So keep tweeting. And we have about another minute for comments. Is there anybody else who has a question? Thank you, Elizabeth, for that question. A lot of people are interested in this artwork going more virtual. I see that as a comment. And that would be great because it is so visual that it works on Zoom actually quite nicely. I just did food demos this morning on Zoom and the food looked beautiful. So visuals like this, Zoom can handle. If there's no more questions, I will pass on from Rachel to Feeding the Medicine and Stories with Care Partners, People Living with Dementia and Health Professionals. Megan Voller is coming on, and she is from Thomas Jefferson University. So welcome, Megan.
Thank you. Bear with me as I get my slides here, and that's Finding the Medicine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I Finding the Medicine and Stories? Did I say feeling?
I think you said feeding, but that.
Well, that's because I was in a culinary medicine course this morning, so feeding is on my mind. I apologize. Food is on my mind. 3 hours of culinary medicine.
No problem.
Thank you, Megan. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me, and thanks to all the hard work that went into the kind of COVID pivot of bringing this conference online and keeping it going. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a 2-year project that ultimately resulted in a public storytelling performance with a cast of 6 health professionals in training and 6 community members who had a lived experience of dementia, either as a care partner or a patient. And I want to start with a whole bunch of acknowledgements. In the interest of keeping this presentation to 10 minutes, I am going to be glossing over many details of this complex 2-year project. And so I just want to thank everyone who was involved at the outset. Huge thanks to our cast of performers, who I will be talking about a bit more. And thanks as well to our many organizational partners, including Arts Philadelphia and Theater of Witness, and to our funder, without whom this project wouldn't have been possible, the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage. So the performance we created was called Tangles in Time, and it took place as a live physical performance on September 13th and 14th, 2019, last fall, here in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Episcopal Cathedral. And there were 3 shows in all, with an audience of around 200 people each time. So each of those 3 shows was sold out. And Tangles in Time came out of a really incredible incredible experience we had working with an organization called Theater of Witness. Theater of Witness has been active in Philadelphia for more than 30 years. It's the brainchild of an artist named Taya Sepanik, who has a background in dance and counseling. And she works with groups of people, typically who have lived through deeply challenging experiences, such as migration, domestic abuse, or police violence. Those are some of the past topics she has made performances about. She works with those folks to tell their stories of personal survival and resilience. And something remarkable about Taya's work is that she often works with people who come from different sides of a conflict or difficult situation, and she brings these people together on stage to find common ground in their individual stories and also their collective suffering and strength. So my organization, Jefferson, was introduced to Taya by another community organization, Arts Philadelphia, which creates arts programs for people living with dementia. And out of a conversation together, the idea emerged to create a Theater of Witness performance about living with dementia, and to have that performance include health professionals who would be caring for the patients of the future, and also the family caregivers whose struggles they needed to understand. So we assembled a cast, and this part took months of outreach and various workshops and sessions designed to recruit people to the project. The community members all came through Arts Philadelphia, 4 care partners and 2 people living with dementia who were the spouses of 2 of the care partners. And then on the health professions side, people came mostly from Jefferson, but 1 also came from Penn. We had 2 medical residents, 2 nursing students, and 2 medical students. Most of the cast members had a personal or professional connection to dementia, but 2 did not. Brienne, a nurse in training, shared her story of caring for her son with autism, and Sunny, a family medicine resident, shared both a story of caring for a patient with HIV/AIDS and a family story of lost and rekindled connections in China. So some of the stories in the performance ultimately were not about dementia per se, but all of the stories were about love, loss, and caregiving. So this cast embarked on a year-long process that began with individual interviews between each storyteller and Taya, and then Taya scripted each person's story and gave it to them to approve or rewrite, a process that entailed multiple drafts. And then a group sharing process began, where people's stories were arranged in sequence and performers took on roles in each other's stories. A music composer created a score, and a videographer taped each person's performance. The videographer's skill was especially important in the case of involving our 2 cast members living with dementia, each of whom was featured with their spouse in a shared story on video. And now I'm going to play a clip from Tangles in Time. This is a video trailer that we made, so it's a montage of clips from different people's stories. It doesn't depict any single person's entire story. And you'll see that it features video of people performing their stories not in front of a live audience, but specifically for the purposes of recording a video. And the full-length videos of people's stories are on our website, which is tanglesintime.org, and this clip is just under 3 minutes.
At the time we met, she was working the night shift as a critical care nurse. She was tall and athletic, and I knew that she could be the one. And we were married 2 years later.
There were an awful lot of clowns out there. And he was perfect.
When Caleb was younger, he wasn't so far behind.
My mother was in a facility for 10 long years.
I knew something was not quite right.
My sister-in-law turned to me and said, "Do you notice something different about Marianne?"
Caretaking took its toll on each of us individually and as a family. I know what they say, even when he does it.
Hi, Megan, we're not able to hear anything.
What's the point?
Nobody knew anything and nobody talked
Is
about
that better?
anything.
The police found her, brought her
Yes.
home, and now I'm on duty 24/7.
We've known each other 60 years.
Can I do this for my future patients?
I wonder if I should have done that differently.
This is so hard.
But there are moments in time when I still see her. Her kindness and caring.
You are a good doctor.
You get angry, you get frustrated, you get happy, you get sad. It's all in there. It's all that bubbling pot.
There is life before us and there is life after us.
I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou my inheritance now and always.
Okay, I apologize for turning my audio off there for a minute. I was coughing and didn't realize it would cut off the video audio. So I just want to delve for a second into sort of conceptually what we felt was going on with this project and why we wanted to do it. The idea of finding the medicine in stories really emerged as our compass through this process. And I think it's worth asking, well, what does that actually mean? I'm someone like a number of people on this call, I imagine, who plans educational programs and courses. And one of the things that I ask myself constantly is which activities do we invest in and how can we prioritize and make space for particularly powerful or effective programs? So I'm just sharing with you some passages from Taya's book, which is called Theater of Witness. And she describes some functions of storytelling that I think will be familiar to you. First is that finding the medicine is about reflecting on your story and discovering a place of growth within it, whether that's a realization, a change of behavior, or even literal survival. And in the context of Taya's practice, this is something that emerges from collaborative work, specifically one-on-one interviews, and then a group practice of sharing and interweaving stories into a kind of testimonial play. And that group or cast function of supportive community is perhaps the most important element. And these ideas will sound really familiar to folks who have worked in the vein of narrative medicine. Arthur Frank, for instance, talks about the capacity of stories to repair the identities of people whose lives have been disrupted by illness or other loss. He also talks about witnessing as the fullest realization of storytelling when it becomes an act of mutual recognition between people realizing they have common ground. And Rita Sharon is also very powerful on this topic. As you know, she advocates for the acquisition of skills related to receiving and crafting stories as essential capacities for physicians. These capacities can improve relationships with patients as well as with colleagues and the self, oneself. And she writes that an important part of this narrative ethics for clinicians is creating a community of care or a community of presence through improved understanding and openness to each other's stories. So finally in this sort of conceptual detour here, a topic that we held very front of mind throughout this process was what it means to facilitate greater empathy in health professions education. And we were really intrigued by the discussion of empathy as relational in this 2016 systematic review. The review proposes that more research should be directed toward how empathy can be facilitated and supported in specific relational contexts, rather than treated as a personal quality that can be increased or decreased through individual training. And I found that very provocative and definitely found myself asking and still asking as a medical humanities educator, what does it mean to create experiences that promote empathy if empathy resides in relationships? So as a function of our grant, we were able to have an ethnographer with us throughout this project who conducted interviews with the health professions participants. And he identified some of the themes you see on this slide from those interviews. And I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I'm gonna jump down to the bottom one, which I found sort of most intriguing. And that was the theme that people learned that their story matters. And that was a point of somewhat unexpected insight for the health professionals in our project. To some extent, they seem to have entered into the project with the feeling that their job was to be the recipients of patient stories, to be more in the listening role, as it were, exclusively. But they left the project feeling like understanding their own story was the foundation of openness to the stories of others, and really the sort of the ground for awareness of the many ways that those stories could connect. And then quickly, I just want to touch for a moment on how one participant, a medical student who was in the performance, integrated being part of Tangles in Time into her required coursework. One of the ways humanities appears in our medical curriculum at Jefferson is as a research track option or a scholarly concentration. And this student, Selena Sway, proposed participating in Tangles in Time as her 2-year preclinical research project. So she completed various sort of deliverables related to participating, including a final reflective essay. And this is an abstract for that essay, or not the entire abstract, excuse me, an excerpt from it. And to close out, I just want to show about a minute of Selena talking about being in Tangles in Time.
Being in Tangles in Time meant for me community and love. We had a great group of people who, through the process of creating and performing the piece, really helped each other in bearing witness and telling some very personal stories, and also helping each other process on past experiences. I learned a lot through introspection. Something I wasn't expecting was to find so many connections and shared themes between our stories, even between stories of people from different generations, different cultures and traditions. I learned a lot about the different modes of communication. Our world relies so much on verbal communication, but as I saw from caregivers and patients that we worked with, so much is transmitted non-verbally, and I don't think I was very good at that before. I think a lot of us aren't very good at it, but it's an important element of our relationships and communication that I think we could all work on. Being entangled.
Whoops, excuse me. Thank you so much for your attention. And I just want to leave you with our website in case you're interested in seeing more videos from the project. There is so much more sort of backstory and detail. So I just will leave you with this URL in case it's of interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Megan. Anybody, we have time for one question. I think we can get one question in if somebody has a question they'd like to ask Megan. Wonderful presentation. We all have stories. Write down, share, and tell and value your stories. with new doctors. She was at a webinar recently. Excellent, thank you. Lots of accolades for this, Megan, so you should feel proud.
Thank you.
I just want to say to everybody, if you're a speaker and you could put your email in the chat when you get off speaking, some people who didn't get it on the slide might be able to get it, which will be helpful for future networking and communication. Could we have that, Megan, could you put in the slide also that in the chat, that organization you just had up, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Would that be possible for you to put that in the chat? So your
Yep.
email as well as that organization. I just want to tell people what I'm doing. I'm taking pictures of the slide, which is quicker than sometimes writing it down. So then you have it in your photos on your iPhone or your phone, whatever phone you use, okay? I'm really proud to present one of my colleagues today. Somebody I really enjoy working with, Sandeep Kapoor, creatively and collaborating to address the opioid crisis. He's a leader nationally in this area, and he has a great team behind him that's listed on his slide, all colleagues of Lisa Martin and myself at Northwell. So thank you, Sandeep, and I think you're on.
Great. Thank you very much, Alice. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I appreciate you guys putting this up as a virtual conference, very important, and I've already learned so much. So as Alice mentioned, my name is Sandeep Kapoor. I'm a faculty at the Donald and Barbara School, Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell in New York. And together with our amazing collaborative team, we were able to infuse a level of creativity with a topic that unfortunately is not touched upon to the degree it should when it comes down to medical education, both for physicians, nurses, pretty much any healthcare professional. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of our experience. So let me start off with some background. 1 in 10 people that actually need treatment for a substance use disorder receive it in the United States. And the sad fact is that the majority of people that do receive treatment don't stem from healthcare professional referrals. This stark reality lends itself for us to really explore a little bit further why the healthcare process is flawed in the sense that we're not really addressing substance use as part of usual care. In further exploration, a good number of years ago, we saw this study in 2017 that proved some of our hypotheses, which dedicated medical education is just not in place in medical schools, in nursing schools, and so on. As you can see from the slide, less than 4 hours of dedicated curricular time is given to addressing substance use in medical school, leaving medical residents feeling uneducationally prepared. Nursing schools are the same, unfortunately, and 75% of nurses reported that they felt unprepared to support patients using illicit drugs. And lastly, I guess one of the misnomers and the false hopes that we have is that our clinical teams can handle a situation that's involving substance use, but as this study has shown, 98% of master social work programs in 2017 didn't require a course in substance use. So our clinical go-tos, our social workers, were also equally as unprepared as everybody else on the clinical team. So that actually led to us on a journey within our pretty much new school of medicine. It was only a few years old at that point. And in the 2013-2014 school year, we inserted a 2-hour session around alcohol use. And this was primarily focused on the effects of alcohol on one's body. And our journey has led us to today, which has been an iterative process of expansion, where today we now have a 30-hour dedicated longitudinal 4-year spiraling curriculum that has given opportunities to our medical students to feel empowered and better educated and prepared to deal with substance use once they leave the 4 walls of our medical school. Throughout the years, we included assessment and examinations. We started to include interprofessional selective electives, 2-week electives, and also what our focus is, the conversation today, is we were able to infuse a 1-week exercise for third-year medical students themed around the opioid epidemic. This whole curriculum that's in front of you right now is actually taught in a very interprofessional, interdisciplinary way with folks from communications, from our health system, Northwell Health, as well as interprofessional members such as health coaches and social workers. So let's talk a little bit about our third year interclerkship themed week around the opioid epidemic. This came about 2.5 years ago, thanks to amazing collaborative faculty members, Dr. Perlman and Dr. Powalczak and others. And we were able to create a 1-week experience for our medical students in third years to really hyper focus on the opioid crisis, which unfortunately has not really discriminated based on social economic status or what area of this country you live in. So we worked together and collated this last run, the third run of Opioid Week, 60 faculty and facilitators spanning 35 different clinical and non-clinical departments. And really, the reason why I love showing this slide is because it shows that this is a disease process, a chronic condition that spans every discipline of medicine, both clinical and non-clinical. So let me show you what the opioid epidemic week looks like really quickly. On Monday, we start off with a TED-like talk around the opioid epidemic. We have folks that have gone through their journey towards recovery. So you really hear from first-person perspectives of patients that are now in recovery, sharing their stories with our medical students. And then we break into 3 different interactive workshops. We have 100 students. Each workshop is run 3 times with 33 students each. And we focus on the topics of judicious prescribing, overdose prevention, as well as alternatives for pain management. Day 2 starts off again with first-person perspectives. We start off with family perspectives, where we have family members that either have suffered a loss or are currently dealing with family members that are going through that journey towards recovery for substance use disorder. We then break into 3 interactive workshops for assessing and diagnosing opioid use disorder, medications for addiction treatment, and navigating the landscape of addiction treatment, really talking about the different levels of care that are available. And the last and final day, we start off with healthcare professionals and their perspectives. So these are healthcare professionals in recovery sharing their first-person perspective of their journey towards well-being. We have a session on neonatal abstinence syndrome, as well as what the focus of today's presentation is, which is our Capstone project that we just infused this past year. And the Capstone project really has been our way to allow our students in a creative manner to really share through their eyes, through their emotions, what they were able to gather over this week experience, and then illustrate that their thoughts in a very creative way. So the Capstone projects were 4 different workshops that we offered. Students selected one, and then we had a show and tell event, if you will, like an emceed, I would say show and tell, in the sense that we gave them creative freedom to represent what them and their small groups came up with based on the deliverables of these little groups. So I just want to talk about creativity for a moment and how important it was for us to insert this into our opioid epidemic theme week. The week is pretty dark and dreary to get off, to start off with. The topic in itself is emotional. There is no 6 degrees of separation when it comes down to knowing someone with a substance use disorder, or unfortunately having lost someone with a substance use disorder. So we thought the best way for us to allow students to reflect and to really gauge their own personal drive and motivation was to really ask them to be creative. And with that creativity, we tasked them very humbly and respectfully, tasked them to take their creativity to advocate, to champion, and to empower others, and really to get together to change the narrative that's in play in our industry as a whole around substance use disorder and the opioid crisis. So the Capstones, like I mentioned, there were 4 different workshops: ethics debate, quality improvement science, creative writing, and a public service announcement. And what we did was, on day 1, we gave them these brief summaries of what each workshop would be, and we asked them to rank in their preference, in their order of preference, which one they would like to take part in. And I'm very happy to say, out of 100 students, we were able to fit everybody in their first or second ranking. So the Capstone session broke down like this. There was 140 minutes. We had 20 minutes for movement between rooms, because there was a lot of herding of people, if you will, between these sessions. We did a 10-minute framing talk, again, challenging them to use their creativity to now voice their thought process and their emotions. They all broke up into those 4 different groups for 50 minutes. And even in those groups, they broke up into smaller groups to come up with some sort of creative illustration. And then we came back together for a 60-minute show and tell with all their fellow students, other faculty members, and we had a panel of judges that represented both the School of Medicine leadership as well as the health system leadership. And I want to just point out how important this was for us. We wanted the students' voices to be heard by others, other than our faculty that are already bought in, but other decision makers that can actually put their voice into the equation. So we gave the judges a respective rubric for each one of the sessions, and prizes were given out to the students that scored the highest based on judging criteria. And the judges actually used those computers that are right in front of you in that picture to judge in real time, and we actually had scores within seconds. So let's talk about the ethical debate for a moment. We actually played out an ethical debate for about 15 minutes. The question that was posed to the against side and the for side was that Big Pharma has been asked to make financial reparations, and the governor's asking for feedback on if we should use that funding for education purposes. So it was a very enlightening and very fueled debate that was, again, scored on a rubric. Quality improvement, we asked students to come up with elevator pitches, utilizing quality improvement science, and really present amongst all of us elevator pitches of 90 seconds on what project they came up with or what smart aim they came up with. And the one on your screen is the one that was actually the one that was awarded the prize. Creative writing, this was I would say, a love of all of ours. We gave students an opportunity to either write a haiku or a different short poem about their experience of the week or personal experiences they brought to the week. And I'm just sharing two of them. I'll read the second one, but there's two up there from our students with their permission. The last one I'll just read. We left you there to leave, but you are still there and always will be. And honestly, for me, this is very touching because this to me reflects back to some of the first person perspectives, especially the healthcare professional in perspective panel that we had. Lastly, a passion of mine was the public service announcements. We gave the students, give or take, about 50 minutes to film, to script, and to illustrate a public service announcement. I'm going to share two with you very quickly right now. Hopefully the audio works.
Did you know that overdose is the #1 cause of death in Americans under 50?
100% of opioid overdoses are preventable.
How, you might ask? With our overdose rescue kit.
Just one spray can save a life.
So be prepared and you can save a life.
How can I get a kit?
Your local pharmacy, police department, or fire department can help you get a kit where you can learn more.
Hashtag
our crisis.
So that was one. I'm going to show you another one, which was the winner, actually.
We all might start our days a little differently.
I check on my patients.
I get ready for work.
I'm starting a family.
I go to class.
But addiction affects us all. Over 130 people die every day from opioids.
So folks, we also evaluated this process. Obviously, what I'm showing to you right now is the evaluation of the total opioid epidemic themed week, showing the change in people's knowledge and attitudes. But student satisfaction for the Capstone project itself rated a 4 and a 4.1 out of 5. We also got some qualitative comments from our students and faculty. And one of the students wrote, I feel like I learned a lot throughout the week. The Capstone projects were a perfect way to end the heavy week with humor and hope. And humor is reflecting back on the Capstone, the show and tell. We did have fun doing it, and the students also had fun with it. Faculty, no one is immune to addiction. Vulnerability and openness leads to inspiration and ultimately change. This generation of medical students are already agents of change as their language, views, and interest in this topic was clearly expressed in these Capstone projects. Just really quickly, lessons learned. So through this Capstone, the students were able to use their creativity to showcase their appreciation and motivation to address the opioid crisis and to really champion a topic in a very different way. Limitations, obviously, we gave them very little time to prepare, but as you can see, all of us were very impressed still with the results. And lastly, I think the biggest lesson learned is that this humanity-centered Capstone framework can be applied to any topic and already has. We've used this for social determinants of health for another theme week, elements of this. And it's also feasibly integrated into any curriculum because of the short amount of time that you need. And we know that medical school curricular time is like New York City real estate, so it's very valuable. So with that said, I'll just say thank you and see if anyone has any comments or questions.
I think we have time for one question, and Dr. Kapoor is definitely available on social media as well as email, but he's on social media as well. And anybody have time for one question before we move on to our e-posters? Sandeep Kapoor, he put everything in. Thank you. Tremendous work, tremendous work. I think your point, I love the point that using a creative capstone to bring people together, where sometimes we do something too concrete, too didactic, too medicinal, and you don't get the energy that you had in this project. So the whole team is colleagues of mine. What can I say? I love you all.
Thank you,
You know that. So I think we're going to move on. I am saving the chat, and I'm going to send it to everybody so everybody has everything. And I'm really excited. We're going into a series now of e-posters. This was a real, I hope we did the right thing by going to e-posters. And if not, I apologize before we start, but I hope this works well. We had e-posters as part of our original plan, so we decided to keep it here. So thank you. And we have Narrative Medicine, a beautiful poster. A webinar is a teaching tool by Bronwyn Cooper from University of Massachusetts Medical School. Thank you for joining us. And I'm sure he's going to put his email in the chat as well.
Yes. Hi, I'm Bronwyn Cooper. I am on staff at UMass Medical School and Memorial Medical Center. My topic for this e-poster is narrative medicine webinar for a pipeline program, basically looking at it as a webinar, as a teaching tool. Now, the interesting part about this is that I developed this with my colleagues and presented it about a month before the COVID thing and the Zoom meetings all started taking place, and you know, going very strong. So I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end, but just to go through what the poster is about, my email is bronwyn.cooper@gmail.com. I think it might be a little too small for you to see on the poster, but I'll put it in the chat at the end. Basically, I got interested in this project because I am a student in the certificate program at Columbia program of narrative medicine, and I'm also on the admissions committee for the BAC MD program, which is for pre-med students at the University of Massachusetts. We happen to have 4 different campuses all over the state. And so I wanted a webinar to try to unify the students and myself to learn more about what narrative medicine is and how it could help them. So to look at narrative medicine, basically it doesn't do justice, this definition, but for those of you who don't know anything about it, it may help you understand a little bit about what narrative medicine is. It's a clinical discipline that studies patient narrative situations and stories as a platform for improving relationships between doctors, patients, nurses, therapists, and other caregivers. In its technique, it combines exposure to narrative writing, close reading skills, literary and philosophical analysis, and experiential work, and applying to clinical settings. The BAC MD program currently has 24 students at UMass Medical School. They are from racial or ethnic groups underrepresented in medicine, or they're economically disadvantaged students, or they're first-generation college students, but they all want to be physicians. So some are in college, some are pre-med, some are in medical school, and the program helps prepare them for what lies ahead. Some of the goals and student learning objectives of this project was to practice close reading and observation of a story, a narrative, a drawing, and a poem for 90 minutes, to practice reflective writing to a prompt, or actually 2 prompts, to discuss both, noticing team dynamics, listening, sharing, finding similarities in each other, prepare for writing portions of the and reading portions of the MCAT and AMCAS applications to medical school, practice self-reflection and self-knowledge, and prepare for interviews such as the MMI interviews in a safe environment. So I'm really calling it, initially I called it a webinar, but really it's a Zoom video webinar, because as a webinar, you have an online seminar style, you have real-time conversation anywhere in the world, allowing for large groups to communicate and discuss or train, to share audio, to share documents and slides, and virtual platform for view only. So the Zoom, what does that add? The Zoom meeting adds the ability to join from anywhere as well, on any device, which is secure, and allows for screen sharing, such as a live video chat with large groups of people who can see each other. And there is the raise hand and chat functions, as well as the whiteboard for brainstorming, and an ability to record. And this is what we're on today. So some of the close readings that I chose, a couple were for work on just things like I took one, actually I think this person is in the audience, The Night Shift by Taranjeet Abuja, in Narrature, in the magazine article from 2017. It's about a CCU patient who is possibly intubated and his inner dialogue on hearing himself being discussed by his medical team. I took a drawing of a ballet point shoes by Nikita Shah called Catholic Dancer from the same journal, and asked, what does this drawing make you think of? I took a short story, Frozen, by Jay Baruch, about a homeless man and how he was perceived by his ER physician, the nurse, and medical student. A poem I Take the Brahms Third Symphony with Me to My MRI by Judy Rowe Michaels, about a cancer patient having another test. And so just by part observation, part analysis, and part how does it make you feel, we went over these and discussed these. And then I asked them to do a 5-minute of writing on 2 prompts. One was on write a time about a time you showed compassion, and then write about a situation you found yourself in when focusing on your breath or breathing, which worked to help you or would have worked. Did we meet these goals? Well, I put out a Survey Monkey. It was 90 minutes Zoom video webinar at the beginning of March. It did expose students early in their career to themes of professionalism, communication, team building, compassion, and reflective writing. I asked them several questions like, how did they enjoy it? What was the best thing about it? What was the least favorite part? What might you want to learn in the future? And would you attend another one of these in the future? And I all came back. I only had 6 participants as it turned out, but they all gave high marks and positive reviews. Future directions that seem to be important would be that to have future Zoom video webinars for other levels in the BackMD program. For example, we're planning one this summer for all the levels, for all 24 students, one in the fall for new medical students, so there'll be 4 of them. And I've participated, since this came out, I've participated in about 7 or 8 Zoom narrative medicine sessions at Columbia Narrative Medicine program, and they've been absolutely well attended and very fascinating if people want to get involved in that. And then what I'd like to do in my future ones would be to add the different capabilities such as chat, raise hand, recording, breakout rooms, and whiteboard use. And also do some research analysis with longitudinal studies looking at short-term, medium-term, or long-term benefits and successes with a larger group of students. So I wanted to thank my colleagues, Dr. Marianne Mano, who's the Dean of Admissions, and Mr. Paul Charles, the Director of the BackMD program, and Ms. Freyes in the IT department. I'd like to also thank all the participants of my webinar in March, and to all of you today for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have question and answers. I think, do we have much time for that?
We really have. I'll give you one question just to be, someone asked, will you publish this work, is a question that's being asked.
Yes, I'd like to.
Okay, so we're encouraging you to publish your work.
Thank you.
I've already sent your poster to 2 people who are involved in pipeline programs at Northwell or Zucker School.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm sorry I misrepresented you. I should have said her instead of he, so I apologize that. Bronwyn.
No problem.
Yes, I didn't catch that name both ways.
You wouldn't be the first person.
This is the first poster presentation I've ever seen that worked well. Really interesting. Well, we're really landmark here today. So thank you, and make sure you put your email in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
I can't wait to share this with colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we are to the art of seeing, the impact of art education on medical student and self-awareness. And there's a big author line here from NYU Grossman School of Medicine, but Ariella Norley is gonna be running this presentation. And Ariel, very important, can you try and zoom in a little? You're able to do that. I can't do it because you're controlling your screen.
To zoom in.
Well, maybe yours looks larger. You might be okay. Hit the next slide. Well, I mean, no, do whatever you want. I think yours is okay. Oh.
How does it look?
That looks good. I just want to go to the poster itself.
Yeah, well, so if it's okay, I prepared a few slides to kind of...
Okay, fine. Whatever you want to do, get started. It's your time.
Okay, perfect. So, hi everyone. My name is Ariella Norley. I'm a medical student at NYU Grossman School of Medicine. My contact info is here, along with the contact information of my co-authors and mentors, Anna William and Katie Grogan. Feel free to reach out to us after the presentation. I'll also put this slide up at the end for you to see. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about our project entitled The Art of Seeing, the Impact of Art Education on Medical Student Self-Awareness. I know it's probably difficult to see on your computer screen, so I've prepared just a few slides, as I said. As you all know, art education is very common in medical schools around the country. You all have probably heard about these courses at your own institutions and might even be the instructors of those classes. At NYU, we offer a 2-week elective for 3rd and 4th year medical students called The Art of Seeing. During this course, students meet at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where they engage in participant-centered discussions, creative exercises, reflective assignments, as well as art making. And Anna William, whom many of you may know, is the instructor of the course, and she's on this call as well. So we know that art education can benefit medical students in several key areas. Many previous outcome studies of art education courses in medical schools have focused on the positive impact of these courses on observational skills, empathy, and communication. However, with physician burnout at an all-time high, we wondered if art education could be used as a tool to improve medical student well-being. And this became the driving question for our research. So well-being is a very broad concept, of course, and is therefore very difficult to measure. So we decided to focus on 2 key capacities that are foundational to well-being, namely self-awareness and mindfulness. Self-awareness refers to a person's conscious knowledge of his or her own feelings, desires, and motivations. Mindfulness refers to an individual's ability to live in, accept, and appreciate the present moment. Both are skills that can be practiced and cultivated over time and are important aspects of a person's overall mental health. In order to measure the impact of the course on these 2 skills, we designed a pre-test and a post-test that consist of 2 validated standardized scales and 3 open-ended responses. The first scale focuses on self-awareness and the second focuses on mindfulness, as you can see. I included a couple of the items from each of the scales on the slide for examples. In the situational self-awareness scale, we ask the students to rank the statement, "I am aware of my innermost thoughts," from strongly disagree to strongly agree, on a scale 1 to 7. And on the mindful attention awareness scale, we ask the students to rank the statement, "I snack without being aware that I'm eating," from almost always to almost never, from 1 to 6. A higher score for both tests indicates a higher level of self-awareness or mindfulness. And for the open-ended responses, we include 3 different works of art and ask the students to write how the images affect them. Each work of art on the pretest has a corresponding work of art on the post-test by the same artist and in a similar style. You can see one example of these works on the next slide. So this is an ongoing study. So far, we have collected data on 2 classes of students, one from last year and one from this year, with a total of 15 students. Our preliminary results are very promising. On both the standardized scales, the students scored higher on average on the post-tests than on the pre-tests. This indicates that the students improved in these capacities after the course. In our qualitative analysis of the open-ended responses, we noticed an interesting pattern. On many of the pre-test responses, students focused on the subject of the painting. For example, saying that the subject looks sad or troubled, or that they wonder about the personality of the subject. On the post-test, however, students focused more on their personal feelings about the works of art. For example, saying that the painting gives them a feeling of sadness or isolation, or that they feel a sense of calm when observing the painting. This shift indicates that the students have become more self-aware and mindful of their own emotions when looking at the artwork. From these preliminary early results, we can conclude that art education is a useful tool for students to practice these skills that are foundational to well-being. Of course, as always, additional studies are needed in order to determine how these effects endure over time. Our next Art of Seeing course actually will be a virtual class held at the end of June, so we're excited to see how that one goes, especially in the age of COVID, when medical students are feeling more anxious than usual. So here's the poster again. I can also put up our contact information for you once more. I think we have some time for questions.
Okay, so questions. Any questions in the chat regarding this project? I want to say how proud I am to have a medical student presenting. Thank you, Ariella, for representing the medical student world. And I thank your colleagues at NYU for giving you this opportunities as great mentors.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And of course, thank you to my mentors again.
Right. So thank you very, very much. And this is really exciting to have a medical student. So many generations here interested in health humanities, and that's wonderful.
Ariella, I do have a question. This is Nancy Richner. I was just curious, what was the question that you asked for the students' written responses to the works of art?
We had the piece of artwork on the screen. So for example, this Van Gogh, and we simply asked, how does this image affect you? We didn't want to ask a leading question about, share your feelings when you look at this, or anything that might change the way that they looked at it or change the way that they responded. And we asked the same question on the pre-test as the post-test.
Terrific. Thank you. Fascinating.
Thank you very much. So I think we're going to move on now to utilizing chamber music as a means of teaching nonverbal communication to medical students, Leo Hall. And I'd love to thank Leo for coming of the AAMC, because he's at Wayne State University. And really excited to, I don't think we need this, really excited to have, great, Wayne, somebody from the Central Region represented, so thank you. And I'm glad to be discussing music because it's one of my favorite humanities, and I know Paul Hated, who will be speaking shortly, is a big fan of music as a humanities. So we're doing justice, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name's Leo Hall, again, from the Wayne State University School of Medicine in sunny Detroit, Michigan. Thank you so much for having me. I want to speak to you all today about a project that began last May and has been ongoing. I'll be talking to you today about utilizing chamber music as a means of teaching nonverbal communication to medical students. So nonverbal communication is an underappreciated yet extremely important component of medical education. In spite of its importance, nonverbal communication is not taught or is taught in very few medical curricula. Chamber musicians, so those musicians who operate in small group ensemble or without a conductor, utilize nonverbal cues as a means of synchronizing their musical intentions. So we asked ourselves whether or not chamber musicians or chamber music as a whole might be used as an appropriate vehicle through which we can teach medical students to understand, appreciate, and then utilize nonverbal cues. So in order to undertake this and to investigate this question, we invited third-year medical students on their pediatric and internal medicine rotation, so third-year medical students, to participate in a brief seminar provided by the Thalia and the Emerson String Quartet. So I think you can see my pointer. On the right, we have the Thalia String Quartet. They're a very young group formed in 2014 in the Zephyr Music Festival. And then on the left, we have the preeminent Emerson String Quartet. We're very fortunate in Detroit to have partnered with the Great Lakes Music Festival, which is an ongoing festival that usually in early June. And Paul Watkins, their musical director, is the cellist for the Emerson String Quartet. So that is the connection. So following a brief discussion by the musicians, students were invited to comment on the cues, nonverbal cues that the musicians used throughout their rehearsals. We then provided a pre and post seminar in which we were to assess the change of the medical students following intervention and performed both qualitative and quantitative analyses. We were very, very happy to find that our intervention was successful, with all students on average demonstrating an increased confidence in acknowledging nonverbal cues in both their patients and their colleagues. Of import here, unfortunately, I was not able to fit that data on the slide, but I do so the data is not shown, but here is our subgroup analysis. So we then stratified and asked ourselves, okay, many of these students may have musical backgrounds. So is there any difference in students who have a musical versus a non-musical background? And interestingly, in the pre-survey, students who have no musical backgrounds cited an increased confidence in acknowledging nonverbal cues as compared to those with musical backgrounds. Following intervention, however, there was no statistical difference between these groups. We also stratified according to race into white and non-white students, given that we know that nonverbal cues are often race functions into one's ability to use and acknowledge nonverbal cues, especially in a medical arena. And we found that white students on average displayed greater confidence in the pre-survey, but that was removed following intervention. With respect to our qualitative analysis, which can be seen here in figure 3, I just want to comment briefly on a few themes that we found, and these are demonstrated here in these small figures. We noticed that major themes that were noticed by our medical students included a appreciation of the breath used by the by the musicians and the chamber musicians, an appreciation of practice makes perfect and iterative improvement through continued rehearsal and practice. Also listening to their listening to the teammates and paying attention to, in this case, the chamber musicians, but also extrapolating that to teammates, and also a more nuanced appreciation of leadership, moving from an individual form of leadership to a collective form of leadership. So ultimately, we were, as I said, we were very, very happy to find that indeed chamber music can function as an appropriate conduit through which nonverbal communication can be taught to medical students. I know this was briefly brought up in the chat, but we did indeed find that students with musical backgrounds underappreciated their ability to appreciate nonverbal cues. We believe that that can be attributed to the fact that maybe students with non-musical backgrounds may not understand the complexity with which chamber musicians utilize nonverbal cues and the breadth of this. and that conversely, medical students with musical backgrounds, may underappreciate their understanding because they understand the nuance. With respect to race, once again, it's important to talk with respect to nonverbal communication. Race is a factor, and with respect to the literature in medical interactions, we were happy to find that this brief intervention was able to improve the confidence for all individuals, and specifically those who had previously cited less confidence in speaking to patients and to colleagues. So ultimately, with respect to our limitations, this study was conducted at a single site and was only a single workshop. And we can't necessarily state whether this can be extrapolated to other institutions, and also whether or not this could be, whether other forms of music, for example, large group ensemble, choral ensemble, and things like that, whether those can, whether this data can be extrapolated to that. With respect to our future directions, barring any kind of changes with COVID, especially in Detroit right now, we're hoping, fingers crossed, to invite back the Thalia and the Emerson String Quartets for another workshop back in August, and also to follow up on the students who are previously M3s, now M4s, to assess whether or not, to follow up once again and see how their clinical experiences were then influenced by this workshop. So I'd be remiss if I were not to acknowledge the Great Lakes Music Festival, with whom we partnered, as I said, and also our Office of Learning and Teaching, which was instrumental in conducting the qualitative analyses for us and iterative thematic analyses. And then also my fellow authors, Georgiana and Connor in particular, two other fourth-year medical students, Simone Brennan from the Office of Learning and Teaching, and Dr. Diane Levine, from the Department of Internal Medicine at the Detroit Medical Center. So thank you all so much. I'll take any questions. Yep.
Sorry, was this elective or required?
Pardon?
Was this elective or required?
This was required for those students who were on the internal medicine.
Okay, so it was a required rotation. Great. Paul Hated has said, I've taken folks to jazz performances and have watched their nonverbals of the musicians in a group like Elias Marsalis Trio in New Orleans. He always has young bassists and drummers, and you could watch the mentor-mentee relationship unfolding on stage, which is exciting. And he also said, did you show them anything about what was going on musically, Paul asked. I'm interested in whether the connection between music, verbal meaning, and nonverbal cues can help in learning about nonverbals. So in other words, I guess I got that right, Paul, or you want to say it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you got that right. I guess what I'm hearing is that the students who were musicians who were picking it up a little faster, they didn't have to spend cognitive energy on the musical meaning, that they had an extra level of meaning with which to look at the nonverbals there. So I find myself wondering if you're going to show them playing a particular piece and you cue the students to, this is what's going on musically for the piece. Now watch what they're doing when you hear this, whether that can even enhance it more.
Could you unshare your screen a minute so we could see you? That would be great.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I'm so excited for a medical student. There was also a discussion here about fascinating, what an original idea inspiring by variables covered and including race, musicians versus non-musicians as well. So everybody's really impressed by your criteria. And what a great pair of glasses, by the way. Oh my God.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Perfect for the screen today. And people are interested if you want partners, so people will be able to find you. Make sure when you get back to the chat.
Oh yes, absolutely.
To put your information in. And that would be great.
May I just comment briefly back to Paul's comment about whether or not students with musical backgrounds. I think what we mostly want to communicate here is that irrespective of background, students all improved and had demonstrated marked improvement in their confidence in appreciating irrespective of musical background. So that it improved for all students which was for us the most pleasing to see. But we do also find that what we found was interesting was not necessarily that students with musical background may have greater understanding, but those students actually underappreciated their confidence in nonverbal cues, which is something that we want to parse out a little bit more. I hope I answered that appropriately.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful, and good luck in your career in medicine. Really proud to have medical students represented.
Thank you so much.
And coming from Detroit, of course. The Art of Anatomy, Foundations of Drawing, Amanda Feingold-Swan from the University of Pennsylvania is joining us next as our last poster before we get to our amazing keynote to close out our day. So this is very exciting. Amanda, are you with us? I guess Amanda is not here. I'm looking. Amanda, you're here. You're on the list of participants.
Sorry, I'm here. I'm here.
Where are you, Amanda? Come on, you got
I
me.
hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but you need to share your screen.
Yes, I'm trying to do that. I'm so sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay. And
do you need help, or you know how to do that?
I thought I knew how to do it, but now, okay, here we go. I think this is going to work. Can everyone see?
Yes, and if you could put that in full view, please.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay, hi everyone. I'm sorry about those technical difficulties. I consider myself a creative person, but I was not really sure how to do an e-poster, so I just did a few slides, which I suppose will help with the information that you can see on the screen. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for having me. So, I think this question has been asked and answered repeatedly in this conference, and I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, but I did want to put up some information to help answer the question that we continually ask ourselves, which is why should med students learn, in this case, to draw? But in lots of other cases, why should they learn to do theater? Why should they learn to listen to music thoughtfully? There are great questions out there about all of this, and I approach every course that we offer thinking about that question and thinking about how I'm going to answer that question when people outside of the medical school ask me that. So we know that the arts and humanities promote many desired qualities in physicians. And I think Dr. Kumagai writes really well in his commentary in the Journal of Academic Medicine that exposure to arts and humanities can disrupt these taken for granted beliefs and assumptions and introduce a really important pause in perceiving and thinking and acting, and encourage engagement with complexity and ambiguity, which I'm sure we can all agree, again, is really important in becoming a physician. And interestingly, in my literature review, it seems that there are fairly few classes in fine arts instruction. The arts courses that are currently developed at most medical schools appear to be focused on art observation. So with all this, we decided to create a Fundamentals of Drawing course for our students. We piloted in the fall of 2019. It was a non-credit elective, so entirely up to students if they wanted to partake in this. And it was offered at the same time as their anatomy course. We wanted to develop skills essential to realistic drawing, improve their observational skills, help them develop fine motor skills, and really also, certainly importantly, provide opportunities for reflection on their experiences of the anatomy lab. And so we had 6 two-hour-long sessions, which were taught by Lucas Kelly, who's currently the artist in residence at the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics. And classes included both a didactic portion, followed by fine art exercises and critiques. And then we also had fourth-year teaching assistants who led some unstructured discussion around the gross anatomy experience. Students used a variety of media throughout the class. They got instruction on creating accurate representations of observed objects. And they developed some familiarity with quick descriptive sketches and also longer, fully rendered depictions of subjects. And then we also had them do these group critiques. And the homework, which on average was about 30 to 45 minutes per week, included creating a self-portrait, as well as drawing from their dreams, parts of their own or their cadaver's anatomy, and people in public spaces. So we did have some outcomes. This was qualitative data that we got from our students. The course was very well received. Students affirmed its educational value and endorsed improvements in their well-being, as well as their drawing and observational skills. And just to note, we had 17 first-year students involved and 3 fourth-year students as teaching assistants. And unfortunately, it broke my heart to say no. We had a waiting list, but we just could not accommodate the numbers that wanted to take the class. So the numbers that were involved represented about 12% of the first-year class. There were some strengths and limitations, of course. We thought the strengths included a productive collaboration between the medical educators and the artist, which was a wonderful experience, and we hope to reproduce that again in the next year. We also felt that it was really important for the students to find that there was a link between the course that they were doing and their anatomy lab, which really provided relevance on both ends. And then also the near peer mentoring by the senior students. And we hope the future iterations of the course can help confirm its immediate and also long-term impacts. Possible changes for the fall, I mean, accepting the obvious possible change of making this all online, if we do actually have them on campus, we hope that the sessions may be a little bit longer to allow them a little bit more time to devote to the practice. They felt in general that they needed maybe a half hour more. We also may consider including more anatomical specimens. Students mentioned wanting that to be a little bit more tightly linked to their anatomy experience, and probably giving the TAs a bit more structure in terms of how to link that discussion to anatomy. And these are some student quotes, which I don't want to take too much time reading through, but I love this one, which was better observation of physical proportions and a better eye and hand more realistically render those proportions. And also that it was a wonderful time to get back in touch with my artistic side, which can sometimes be lost in the shuffle for excellence in education. I think in terms of transferability to other institutions, there are several things to consider if you are designing a similar fine arts experience. Certainly who will teach the elective is really important. I mean, we were incredibly lucky to have a very talented artist at our disposal, and I cannot thank Lucas enough for his involvement. But obviously not every school will have that. So in terms of who will teach the course, I think that's an important consideration. Also, interestingly, something I didn't anticipate was the physical space in which to hold the class actually was quite important in terms of light. And then considering having a space outside of the medical school to teach. We did it in the building where they take their other classes, which I'm not sure was the best option, but it was the only one we had. We certainly had to create a budget for the materials. And I think also, you know, setting reasonable expectations for students that this is not going to be an anatomy class. This is not anatomical drawing. This has different expected outcomes. And then certainly in this next iteration, we will have a much closer relationship with the anatomy faculty. And I think that's really important in general. And also I think it's wonderful to have teaching assistants. So I just want to give a thanks to Lucas Kelly, who I believe is listening, who's a professor of visual arts at Mercer County Community College. That's his personal artist website. And then he's the artist in residence at the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics. Anjan Chatterjee, who's the director at the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics, who helped us put together the course. My mentor, Horace DeLisser, and also the medical students that helped us. Michelle Guo and Jennifer Siegel helped just really coming up with the idea for something like this. And then Liz Cardler, Burke Bauer, and Jillian Smith were our teaching assistants.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Amanda, there is a question in the chat.
Sure.
Students who took the course want to become surgeons, or in particular plastic surgeons? So any demographics?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know necessarily what the students in the course will end up doing. I mean, as we all know, first-year students can be quite fickle in what they think they're going to end up in specialty-wise, but we didn't ask that question. But, you know, we hope to continue to follow this cohort of students throughout their 4 years, and that's an excellent question for us to pose to them in their 4th year, and then look back and see what impact that may have on the data we collected.
Right, everybody's enjoying this. And I just want to mention that Katie Grogan says there's a project at NYU. I can't say it's similar because I'm not familiar, but it's called Arts and Anatomy, and there's a website. So you might want to collaborate a little bit with NYU. It's just a little bit north of you from Philadelphia.
Yes, not too far.
A little bit on the Jersey Turnpike. So certainly consider that. So that's a great idea. There's lots of literature, of course, on medical humanities for everybody to participate in. And I'll put up my faculty development website. I have an article collection out to PubMed, and I have an entire collection of medical humanities, and lots of the articles coming up here are in that collection, and give credit to the authors, of course, of those articles. So I'm going to make sure I put in the chat the link to my article collection on my faculty development website that I've done on medical humanities. And there's a question, could students meet clinician artists such as the surgeon whose pictures we saw?
Oh, I'm sorry. Those were Google pictures.
Those were Google pictures. Okay, so those were not that.
We do have. There actually is an anatomical illustration department at Penn, and so there's a course that I didn't talk about that was put together by 4th-year students. Liz Card is one of them, and they actually drew on faculty from that department, and I think that will be a wonderful resource for students in the future.
And Ariella, who's a medical student, said it was great to take this course at NYU, so obviously there's interest. And Sarah Brown says we have a private project offering visual arts instruction with the surgical residents. With residents, that's even more amazing, getting residents involved in things. They're certainly a hard group to reach. And I think, Sarah, you're in the UK, if I'm not mistaken, and collaborating with the School of Visual Arts. No, University of Kentucky. Sorry, I got my K's mixed up here. University of Kentucky, so not too far away. Great reference on the chat. Once again, I'm going to save the chat if I technologically can do this. This is a question for any speakers. What approach do you take to help participants overcome anxiety, shyness about sharing their artistic talents or lack of, who might be a little less courageous than students, particularly faculty?
I'll speak briefly from my experience, and then I'll open it up. I mean, we made it very clear in how we advertised the course that it was for non-artists, that it was not going to be focused on the craft. It was really just going to be focused on tapping into their personal interest and exploring whatever drawing meant for them. And I think Lucas did a wonderful job of that in the class itself, that he did not put this kind of creation of art as the goal. The goal was really just to kind of tap into their creativity, whatever that looked like, literally, for them. So I think part of it certainly is the instruction, and then part of it is also how you market it to students.
Thank you. And anybody else has thoughts on that, you could put that in the chat, because we're approaching the time of our keynotes, and we have 2 keynote speakers, so I'm super excited that we're on time for them. We have, this afternoon has gone so quickly, I can't even imagine that we've been together already now for 2 hours. It's just been an amazing amount of time together sharing. I'm so excited to spend my day this way, so thank you. So we have the fundamental role of the arts and humanities in medical education, insights and updates from the amazing AAMC and the scoping review team. So we have Lisa Howley from the AAMC, who is in charge of strategic initiatives, and certainly health humanities and the arts is strategic and an initiative. and Paul Hated, who's one of the key team members on the scoping review team that they're preparing. So I can't say enough the pleasure I have in the two of them being with us and sharing their time with us. It couldn't be more perfect. And the fact that they're both in the Northeast region, which is highly represented today, is so exciting. So thank you, and I'm going to let you proceed. I don't know who's going first or what the order is, but I'm sure you'll be able to figure that out among yourselves. How's that?
Thank you so much, Alice. Can you hear me?
I can hear you beautifully. So nice to hear your voice, Lisa.
It's wonderful to hear and see you, Alice. And I'll be going first, and I'm actually so excited to be here with all of you today, and as excited actually to be able to join this session with my wonderful medical educator and educational researcher, and that's Dr. Paul Hated. So I do have some wonderful information I'm really excited about. I hope you will be as well, that I want to share with you on behalf of my team at the AAMC. So I will do that. I'll share first, and then Dr. Hated will share, of course, his work and his team's work as well. So. But before I do, Alice, I just want to thank you and all your colleagues who, your planning committee, who really pivoted, this spring in a remarkable way, and is putting on this wonderful virtual conference. So congratulations to all of you for that work, and thank you, actually. Really impressed at how you've been able to do that so quickly, and it's very impressive. I'm learning a lot from you and your team, so thank you for that. So without further ado, because I have a lot to share and I want to get right into this, I am really, as I said, excited to be able to talk to you about an initiative that I oversee at the association. It is called the Fundamental Role of the Arts and Humanities in Medical Education. Today, I'm going to share some insights and updates with you all and talk to you about ways that you can engage with us very soon, actually. On the screen, you see a couple things. Of course, I mentioned Dr. Paul Hated, who's going to be joining me right after I share a little bit of information with you. You also see hashtag, so we'd love for you to connect with us on Twitter by using the hashtag frame. And that's frame with an H. And of course, at AMC Today. And that's my Twitter address as well, so you can connect with me. I would love to hear from all of you on Twitter. I don't have any personal financial disclosures, but I do want to mention that this work, we are actually delighted and grateful to have the support of 3 fantastic institutions, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation have all provided us with funding, current funding actually, to support this work. And the first one, the National Endowment for the Arts, was a very new grant. We actually just got confirmation of yesterday. So you all are the first group that I have the pleasure to talk to about that work and about that exciting opportunity that we have thanks to the NEA. I do have to mention that any views, findings, conclusions, recommendations expressed today is not on the part of those 3 organizations, but myself and of course in my role at the Association of American Medical Colleges. For those, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but if you don't know about the AAMC or maybe you don't know as much as you would like, reach out to me, email me, connect with me. I would love to talk to you more about it. There are many, many ways that educators can, and I hope are engaged with our association. We often find at these regional conferences that we have, and this one's actually beyond the region. It seems to be international actually, which is wonderful. But if you have questions about the AAMC, I would love to talk to you about it. I'm a fellow educator myself and was a member of the GEA, the Group on Ed Affairs, for over 20 years actually before I took on this position about 4 years ago. So would be delighted to talk to you more about that, just in general. So our session objectives for today, I want to again introduce you to this strategic initiative, describe ways that you can engage with us, and then I'm going to as quickly as I can pass it off to my colleague, Dr. Paul Hated. So the overall goal of this initiative, which is now about 2 years into a multi-year initiative, is to improve the practice, the education, and the well-being of physicians through a deeper integration and understanding of the arts and humanities in their professional development. And just to give you a little bit of history in the timeline, very recent history, but a few years ago, actually in 2016, soon after I came to the association, started working in this space. And then in middle of 2017, we held our first Thought Leaders Forum, where we brought together thought leaders across the country, actually, in Canada, to help us consider this space and the role, the unique role that the arts, humanities play in physicians' development, whether that's pre-med, medical students, residents, continuing on into the ongoing professional development of physicians. We really are invested and interested in exploring that, and those thought leaders helped us really craft a strategic initiative, which is what then we then launched it the following year. We have an integration committee, we call it the Frame IC. That integration committee was charged last year. We have met a few times since then, and we have a number of subcommittees that are working on various efforts related to the initiatives, which I'll explain briefly. Last year, we commissioned a scoping review team, and they have just finished their work, actually, and that's what Paul's going to share with you very soon. So I won't say anything more about that, because he will. And then I am excited to share with you some new projects that we have in place designed to really support our clinicians, our constituents, our learners, our educators during this pandemic. So that's very new work, actually. And then we also have a new monograph that's going to be published later this year, and we are just putting the final touches on a draft, and that's going to be put through our creative services team, and that'll be released later, as I said, in the year. These are the wonderful faces of our integration committee team. There's a few folks who are missing who just weren't available at the time, so this is not a complete picture, but it is the vast majority of members of our integration committee. And some guiding assumptions about our work. We believe that medicine is an art as well as a science, that the arts and humanities have both instrumental and intrinsic value in how we develop our physicians, and that a scholarly approach to the design and evaluation is important for really optimizing the integration of those curricula and understanding the impact that they have. We believe that the designers of these curricula, so the medical educators who are designing those programs, should intentionally and effectively integrate the arts and humanities into their teaching and learning, and broadly, actually, throughout pre-med, throughout the continuum of medical education. And we also encourage physicians to use the arts and humanities to foster their own professional development, well-being, and resilience. So those are kind of just guiding kind of assumptions about our work. And the monograph that is forthcoming, that I mentioned already, really will dive deeper into those assumptions, or those principles, if you will. And we'll also include details about the monograph that Paul's going to share with you in just a moment. This is, you're the first to see the cover, actually. This is, we just chose this artwork. And so the picture on the right with the red square around it is what the monograph will look like. And as I said, that's coming out in the months ahead. A few other things I wanted to mention related projects that are underway. Thanks again to support of the NEH for this work. We're developing a digital guidebook, or a kind of an interactive textbook, to help those who are new to this space, who want to understand how can I adapt my curriculum and integrate arts and humanities into my curriculum, for example. So it's really a guide designed for those who are new to this space and wanting to know how to get started. We have a grant opportunity, actually, that's coming out, and the RFP is going to be released very, very soon, actually. Just putting some final touches onto that RFP. So that call please check our website, and I'll actually make sure that Alice, that you get connected on that announcement right away so you can disseminate it to your attendees here. It would be wonderful. So it's a small grants opportunity. We're going to be awarding 5 $25,000 grants for faculty to improve the evaluation of their curriculum, their arts and humanities-based curriculum. And we're also developing a new faculty development, professional development program to support really specifically actually the scholarship of program evaluation related to arts and humanities programming. And then wanted to give you some insight into these are very new projects, new efforts that we just are lifting up and kind of quickly, rapidly developing in light of this pandemic, actually. And there are 3 different projects actually related to this. We did just, as I said, receive funding from the National Endowment for the Arts to do this work. And there are 3 components. The first is the Good Listening Project and Listening Poet Session. So there's an organization, nonprofit, called the Good Listening Project. We are partnering with that group, wonderful group of listening poets. They will be offering their services, the opportunity for our constituents to have a conversation over Zoom, actually a private conversation. That conversation will then be used to craft a poem. And then those poems will be collected with the permission of the constituent and then shared out broadly with our community. StoryCorps is another nonprofit organization that we're also partnering with. They're a much larger group. They've been around for quite a while, actually. You may be familiar with them. They have an Friday NPR full segment, which I love. So we partnered with them to create a unique AAMC collection of stories of those healthcare professionals' experiences amid COVID. And I don't have a whole lot of time to go in depth in regards to the narrative and the program and how that will work, but I'm happy to talk to you directly about that if you're interested. More information will be coming out very soon, actually, just in the week or 2 ahead about that project. Essentially, there's an app that's available that constituents will be able to connect through the app and have a conversation that would be recorded. And those audio files will be saved within the Library of Congress, actually, and archived there. And a small number of stories will actually be turned into what they call storyboards, which are just edited brief segments, a few minutes of the conversation with some visuals to go along with that conversation that will reflect, the unique experiences of our constituents at this time. And that includes learners as well as, of course, physician faculty and educators. And then finally, we're putting out a call for 55-word stories and poems of our constituents, with or without images, actually. Again, that reflects kind of how they are making meaning and finding and using, how are they translating this experience into 55-word stories and poems. So putting out a call for those creative works and then sharing those back with the community as well. So those are 3 projects that I said we rapidly are working on and we'll be launching next month. I am almost done, actually, but before I hand it off, I wanted to share with you this, which is one example of a listening poet session poem. So if you don't mind, I want to read this because it's actually lovely and reflective of this time that we're in. So my heart feels tight, breathtakingly tight, fully filled by the flow of fear and bravery, and fear. My heart feels raw, tenderly raw, along the edges where I can feel the grip of promise. Promise holds my heart, and in her hands I hear my melody. I am here, I am ready, and I am enough. So that's just one example of the work of a good listening poet. And this was crafted after a listening session by an ICU physician as she was facing COVID-19, of course. And as you see at the bottom, she says, "I have been tearing all morning." She was feeling both fear and bravery. She feared the unknown, that her medical training might not be enough. This is a quote, "I know I couldn't go on and not do this. It's my duty as a human being and as a doctor." So we are hoping to be able to facilitate these conversations and then creative works as a result of those conversations as a way of healing and finding kind of resilience in this pandemic. So in closing, I just want to share ways that you can engage. We would love to hear from you. First, how are you using the humanities and arts to educate physicians? I know that a lot of you are sharing today, and I'm actually going to ask Alice if I could get, kind of a summary of all of the ways that you're sharing or using the arts and humanities would be wonderful for us. And then also would encourage you when the call comes out, and which it will be coming out soon, to submit stories, creative 55-word stories as well as poems. And I would love your help in getting others to submit. I feel you guys are the choir, as somebody mentioned earlier, but would love your help kind of facilitating the submission process and encouraging others to do that. Also conduct StoryCorps interviews, and those details will be forthcoming as the logistics of how you'll be able to go about doing that, and encouraging others to do the same. And of course, submitting a grant proposal. We'd love to hear from you all about ways and proposals for how you could use some funding to support your work. And so that's what I have. We can, I thought we could just go right to Paul, and then maybe we take questions after he's done as well. Does that work for you, Alice?
Of course. Go right to Paul, and then we can have Q&A.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
So Lisa, I think you need to unshare your screen. There we go. And I'll share mine. So hello, my name is Paul Haydet, and I'm representing the Scoping Review team. Here is our entire team, which includes investigators from multiple institutions in the United States and Canada. I want to give a shout out to Tracy Monitz, who I believe is on the call today and really has been the leader of this team and the glue that has held our team together. This was a commissioned work by the AAMC in support of the monograph that will be coming out. And there hopefully will be several articles coming from the scoping reviews to journals near you soon. There are several under review currently. And we started with this question: how and why are the arts and humanities being used to educate physician and interprofessional learners across the developmental spectrum? I'm not really going to get into the methods, just so that I can use the time and we can take a little walk through the results. I will say that our initial searches produced from 1991 onward over 25,000 articles, and we screened over 21,000 and did a second level of screening on over 5,000 and ended up with 769 articles in the final review. So in scoping review terms, that's a fairly massive scoping review that we've completed in just over a year's time. And I can talk the details of the methods, but I want to get us into the results. I'm going to present two types of results. I'm going to present some descriptive results on the records that we reviewed, and then I'm going to present two more conceptual results. As I'm assuming you can appreciate, the timeline was short, and so there was certain questions that we would have liked to ask, but we did not actually get the time to ask. But we now have a database of 769 articles in which additional questions could be asked. So I'm going to start with some descriptives. Here are the various art form or humanities subjects that appear in the records in our scoping review. The records include mostly journal articles, but also include books, book chapters, and theses. We did not do gray literature or hand searching due to time constraints. So this is a snapshot of the published literature without those additional sort of looks. And as you can see, the literature and arts and humanities and reflective writing and narrative medicine are the biggest represented categories among all of the categories of arts and humanities subjects in this review. We looked for articles with multiple medical learners, so we did not restrict. So anywhere from pre-medical up to sort of postgraduate was included. The number of records is dominated by undergraduate medical education. And we were also looking for interprofessional offerings. And as you can see from the pie chart on the right, the vast majority of records were medical only. So not that much interprofessional in this literature. We looked at whether when there were courses that were talked about, or course kinds or curricular offerings, whether they were evaluated and whether the learners in those curricular offerings were evaluated. On the left side, you see whether the curricular offerings were evaluated, and just over half were evaluated. So nearly half of the records did not have an evaluation of the course or did not talk about an evaluation so that we could tell. Same thing with assessment of the learners. The learners were only assessed in 27% of the records. 37% they clearly were not, and another 33% there was insufficient information to tell. So one of the opportunities in this literature is for more robust evaluation of the curricula and evaluation of learners. We looked at what the types of publications are, and as I said, we had journal articles and book chapters and books and dissertations, and you can see on the left the relative proportions of each. The vast majority of this literature is journal articles. We also classified the articles as to whether they were conceptual articles, whether they were primarily descriptives of a curriculum or what have you, whether they were empirical studies, or whether they were reviews of the arts and humanities in health sciences education. And one of the things we also looked at was whether there was an underlying theory articulated in the article. There was a differential articulation of theory in the articles. The conceptual articles had much more theory. The empirical and descriptive articles had less. Also, there was higher descriptions of theories in the books and book chapters and dissertations than there were in the primary journal articles. Now I'm going to talk about the two conceptual analyses. One was we looked at how the articles in their language positioned the arts and humanities relative to the practice of medicine. And we used a framework that had been published by Denhart in 2016. And in Denhart's framework, the arts and humanities in the review that they did were positioned as either intrinsic, meaning they're a critical part of medicine, or additive, meaning there's something that's added on to medicine, or curative, meaning they're the fix for medicine, some problem in medical practice. And you can see the relative positioning of the arts and humanities in the records we looked at. A particular article could be classified as more than one. So the Venn diagram shows the overlap, and the bar graph shows the total numbers in each category. Overwhelmingly, the literature we looked at positions the arts and humanities as additive to medicine. The other conceptual analysis we looked at is how the arts and humanities are used in medicine. And what emerged from this is what we're calling the PRISM model for arts and humanities teaching in medicine. The idea that the arts and humanities in this literature are talked about being used in one of four ways. Being used for mastering skills, being used to create perspective taking, to create dialogue and help learners understand the perspectives of others besides themselves. Being used to create personal insight related to professional identity formation and others. And being used to create social advocacy, to activate learners, to help them understand the underlying cultural values that are underneath a particular thing. The more we dug into this, the more we realized that it doesn't matter what you're teaching, that a particular content area could be taught using any of these approaches to the arts and humanities, and hence the name, the PRISM model. The idea is that these four act as lenses through which you can look at your particular content that you want to teach. And by looking through the different lenses, you may actually see and have different ideas about how you want to design your educational process and how you want to execute it when you're with the learners in real time. I'll give an example using a jazz course about communication and teaching about communicative space. If you were going to look through the mastering skills lens at creating space, you might use jazz pieces to help students model and plan how they're going to practice communicative space. If you were using it in the perspective taking lens, you might use jazz to create a dialogue amongst the students about what space in communication means and help them come to a more nuanced understanding of what communicative space is. If you were using it for personal insight, you might play some jazz songs for the students and ask them which one had more space and which one did you like better and what are you learning about your own personal challenges in building space into your communication. And if you were going to use it for social advocacy, you might play students the same two jazz songs and ask them which one has more space, and then ask them, which one do you think most people in our society would like better? And what does that teach us about how society treats space? And what does that mean for you as you try to employ communicative space as you go into the clinic? And so the idea behind the PRISM model is that there's these four lenses through which you can look at any content that can give you ideas about how to deploy the arts and how to be strategic in making design choices and execution choices when you're with learners. In the literature, these are the relative proportions of the four components. You can see blue is for mastering skills, gray is perspective taking, purple is personal insight, green is social advocacy. The majority of records in the existing literature are about mastering skills and perspective taking. What I'd like to do before questions is I'd like to end with a poem too. I presented an earlier version of our work on January 15th which was the birthday of Moliere at the National Organization for Arts and Medicine meeting. And I presented this poem at the time, and I was looking at my slides last night and realized, oh my goodness, how this poem takes on different meaning now, or how this quote, it's not a poem, it's a quote. So I'll finish with the Moliere quote. All the ills of mankind, all the tragic misfortunes that fill the history books, all the political blunders, all the failures of the great leaders have arisen merely from a lack of skill at dancing. Thank you.
Well, on 1 minute, it was so powerful.
I'm sorry?
I said that poem was so powerful, you leave it on 1 minute, everybody, or copy it into the chat maybe.
I'll copy it into the chat.
Okay, so any comments on this? There are comments in the chat. This PRISM framework has totally resonated with me. I called it brilliant, if you'd like to know.
One question, Alice.
Janine, go ahead, ask your question.
Janine, you mentioned the application of arts and humanities education for improving well-being. Have you found any application in your scoping reviews or any studies on that?
Yes, I think there is, and I'll invite Tracy to chime in too, since she was on the synthesis team and is closer to the actual articles than I am. Yes, there is the usage of arts and humanities for well-being kind of activities. I'm going to say something, and Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that literature has been increasing recently.
Great, thank you. Great presentation.
And the poem is already in the chat.
Oh, did somebody put it in?
Someone put it in. Wonderful keynote, people are saying. And I heard from a colleague at HMI that our dear friend Paul just got a big award today when I heard he was speaking. So congratulations.
Well, it was a couple of weeks ago, but it was the SG Educator Award. Yep.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
But the acceptance speech features a quote from the liner notes of Jimi Hendrix's "Are You Experienced?" So check that out. I'm connecting Jimi Hendrix with education.
I love that. Really exciting work seeing this, and we should all be at Penn State. Maybe you want to give a plug for the conference at Penn State next year.
The Humanities Conference is being planned for March in Hershey next year. So hopefully, you know, the craziness will be over by next March.
150 people on this call should absolutely be at this conference at Penn State and enjoy the beauty of Pennsylvania with, I'd say one of the, I don't know if it's the first Department of Medical Humanities at a medical school and the first department to sponsor the Journal of Medical Humanities. Am I getting my stats right, Paul?
I do not know about the journal. I know that the editors of that journal for years have been members of the department. The Department of Humanities at Hershey is the first department in a medical school. And it was the brainchild of Dr. Vashtian, I forget his first name, and Dr. George Harrell, who was the founding dean in the 60s at Penn State.
Thank you for that. So very exciting. So we want collaboration from Amanda here. And if you'd like to hear Paul's keynote, his award acceptance video is a 4-minute gem, as someone said, so that's great. And we've all enjoyed coming to Penn State.
I will just say that the first version of that acceptance speech sucked. And I was saved by my high school senior son, who added his directing and editing abilities to it. I am still learning how to live in this virtual world. I'm hopelessly old school.
So Noah has been added as a reference here in the chat, so that's great. So this is the schedule now. Leanne is going to come on and close us out. We're on schedule, which is really amazing. Leanne's going to do closing remarks, including talking about our evaluation process. Obviously, Lisa Howley has addressed evaluation, and we need to evaluate this conference. So Leanne's going to talk about that for us. As a planning team, we want feedback. So she's going to close us out and talk about that. And we do have an optional closing program that's going to start at 5:30 using theater as a teaching tool in medical education that Lisa Martin is going to open for us. And I'm going to close that program talking about theater as a teaching tool. So we have a performance that will happen at 5:30 if you could hang in with us, or a little sooner depending on the closing remarks. And I cannot thank enough my planning conference team. I am totally blown away. And I must give background notice to two people from Zucker School of Medicine, Connor and Ashlyn, who are behind the scenes making sure everything worked technically perfectly today. That was a brainchild to have them. And I cannot thank Connor and Ashlyn enough for making everything perfect. And this is a great way to share resources and share in a non-threatening environment. We want psychological safety in everything we do. So I will take those words to heart. Leanne, we need psychological safety for this work to continue, which I hope today was the beginning of. And I think I'm turning it over to notice what's in the chat, some comments that are really great, and I'm turning it over to Leanne to close us out. Go ahead.
Thanks, Alice. On behalf of the AAMC, the NEGEA, my co-chair Alice, and our amazing planning committee, I just want to thank all of you for joining us today for this virtual conference. It's really times like these that the lessons to be found in health humanities seem especially boundless. And it's been an honor to share this virtual space with our accomplished presenters and our wonderful colleagues who have joined us in the audience. I'm personally very appreciative that we had the ability to come together across these great distances in the face of our world's challenging circumstances and the fact that our original pre-conference wasn't able to happen. The silver lining of that is that we got to open this up to the international audience that we have here today, and I feel very grateful for that. We gain hope and inspiration in celebrating the health humanities together, and there's great joy to be had in these sorts of gatherings. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending your time with us today. I hope that it was as fulfilling for you all as it was for me. You will receive an email with a brief evaluation of the experience today, as Alice was referencing. Please take a few minutes to fill this out so that we can learn for the next time we do this, or for others who might want to plan something like this after us. And a quick note that if you are interested in future events hosted by our special interest group, there's an optional place at the end of the evaluation to include your name and email so that we can add you to the mailing list. Also, as Alice mentioned, please stay on for a short theatrical presentation by our special guest, Anna Snap, who will perform scenes from her one-woman show. This performance and the discussion that follows will serve as a live example for some of the mediums that we've been discussing today for enhancing medical education. So I'd like to say have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to joining you all again sometime soon.
Thank you, Leanne. I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to work with Leanne and the rest of the planning committee. And I want to say I hope you stay on for one more half hour, because here comes the introduction by Lisa, and then I'll lead the discussion. And this is something we actually did last week at the Long Island community got to participate in. Plus, in a prior year, we did the full performance, but we did this sort of snapshot. But today we're going to focus really on a discussion about theater as a teaching tool after we see Anna's performance. So Lisa, you want to get started for us?
Sure. So I will be introducing in a moment Anna Snap, who is an actor and a writer, and she has performed her one-woman show, I Found That the Sun Will Rise Tomorrow, at the Zucker School of Medicine and Northwell Health venues several times as part of our Ulster Society Humanities and Medicine program. And each time we had her perform, we followed her performance by a very intense debriefing and Q&A in which we involved experts in the field of PTSD and eating disorders, and really had some very powerful conversations on the connections between mental and physical illnesses. We've asked Anna to join us to share scenes from her play during this conference, because although we will not have our typical interactive debriefing afterwards, you will be able to see how powerful a tool theater is for making people feel. When we feel things, we remember them in a profound way. They actually become part of who we are. And what better way to teach empathy? So without further ado, I would like to introduce Anna Snap in scenes from I Found That the Sun Will Rise Tomorrow.
Hi. Thanks for having me, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Lisa. I'm just going to get started.
Just 1 second, Anna. Can you remove the shared screen, Connor? Remove the slides. There we go.
At this point, who knew what the body pain was coming from? I later figured out that there was a huge reason why my body was in so much pain, and it wasn't just the Crohn's disease or this newfound diagnosis of Lyme disease. There was yet another new diagnosis: fibromyalgia, a disease known for its widespread musculoskeletal pain. Fibromyalgia, a disease that 30% of patients with Crohn's disease have. There was something haunting about the piling up of diagnoses. It felt murky and baffling. It was like a cacophony of sound, like someone yelling different ailments at me, but it was hard to know which one started first or why it started in the first place. Which diagnosis was being screamed the loudest, and how did they all connect to make this truly dissonant harmony? They were all overlapping, all somehow connected, but there was something deeper going on. Something happened that made the noise get so much louder. And while I didn't know it at the time, the realization soon to come would be astounding. Fibromyalgia, a disease that can be triggered by trauma. To my body. I resented you for so long. I resented that the doctors poked and prodded me, using me as a medicinal guinea pig without any regard for my feelings. I resent having to leave school 3 times because of how paralyzing the pain was. One day, I even spent an entire day in front of the toilet vomiting out your blood and feces. You infected me with deadly bacteria and autoimmune diseases that left me undiagnosed and unaware of what was going on for years. I wish those 6 years had been spent living instead of being trapped in the bleak walls of hospitals. I felt scared you may never heal. I'm sorry that I was in so much pain that I stopped caring about you. I feel ashamed that I cut you with a razor and filled the void with food. I appreciate you screaming out loud to me in 2010 that my body and mind were scared. I want you to realize that I'm going to handle everything you throw at me, but you must know that you did let me down. But I now feel a relief so beautiful that I'm learning to love myself and the world around me. But most importantly, I've finally forgiven you for betraying me. Imagine the best you've ever felt. No, really, think of the best moment of your entire existence on earth thus far and multiply that times 1,000,000. I can't stop. What's that? Yes, it's fucking hilarious. Don't try to bring me down. You're always trying to bring me down. Fuck it. I'm gonna take over Poland. I'm gonna fucking take over Poland. First, it'll be Warsaw. Then I'll move on to maybe Rybnik. Oh, this is gonna be fucking epic. They won't know what they're in for. How do you take over a country? It's fine. I'll figure it out. I'll backtrack there. This is good. 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 I feel good. I feel good. I feel good. I feel really, really good. I can run right now. Right now. I can do anything right now. I can do anything right now. How's this possible? I feel both now. I feel great, but I hate myself. I love myself. I hate myself. I love myself. I hate myself. I love myself. I hate myself. And crash down again. Down again. No, stop. Bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder. The most extreme ups and downs I've ever felt in my entire life. One day, I'm on top of the world, and the next, all I want to do is kill myself. It's a terrifying roller coaster that is uncontrollable. I remember one week in 2012, I didn't sleep for 5 days. 5 days. The less I slept, the more hyper I got, but I was exhausted. It eventually turned into a mixed state. That is the worst. It's when you feel both at once. You feel like you can do anything, but also like you can't do anything at all. Your body and mind are in so much angst that you're too anxious to sleep. And the cycle continues. You sleep for days and then can't sleep again afterwards. Then you're manic again. You interrupt people, talk 1,000,000 miles a minute, hallucinate and spend hundreds of dollars. Then you're back in bed again, wondering why you're even alive. It's a scary world to live in. And it's one I lived in for years and years. Maybe there was a part of me that wanted to stay sick. Maybe it was easier to be stuck in a dark hole than to fight my way to the light. Because there's no elevator to healing, to freedom from your demons, to true self-awareness and happiness. You have to take the stairs. And man, did those stairs feel steep. So incredibly steep that no amount of strength would get me to the top. But I didn't know why I was stuck. Something changed in 2010, and I didn't even realize it. I didn't even know that the most earth-shattering trauma of all is potentially what caused the rest of my world to unravel, for my body to fail me. I didn't make the connection. The connection that when something so horrific happens to you, the rest of you shuts down. It closes itself off to the world. It stops functioning. It's no longer the same. I'm at a war with the world, with my mind, with my body. One moment I'm fine, then boom, I run to the kitchen, collapse onto the floor, and inch my way into the corner so that nothing or no one can scare me from behind. No, stop, help. I keep repeating those words over and over again, but it's not doing anything. I'm not safe, and I never will be. For the love of God, someone help me, I can't breathe. No. Don't touch me. I can't even fathom the feeling of another human body against mine. Get away from me. No, I don't know how I feel. I feel nothing. I feel numb. I can't see or hear anything. But then I realized, no matter how hard I hold myself, the world is still around me. Anyone can touch me. Anyone can hurt me. You know when you're feeling super down about your body You get out of the shower and you look at your mirror, at your stomach and your thighs. You even turn around while still looking in the mirror to check out your ass. You're feeling like guys won't like you because you're considered fat by society or by that wonderful body mass index. But then you think of all the wonderful people who've brought you up when you've been down. For instance, doctors, you know, they've been super supportive. When I went to the Mayo Clinic in 2014, there was this app you could get on your phone. And it was pretty nifty. It told you what your appointments were, what your lab results were, et cetera, et cetera. But the best part of it was the patient summary. First sentence. Anna Snap is an overweight 23-year-old woman. Overweight. Overweight. Mayo. Thank you so much. I've come all the way to Minnesota and just, thank you. You are truly a beacon of hope in this beautiful fucking life I am living right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mayo, but I've come all the way to fucking Rochester, Minnesota, and all you do is remind me that I don't fit into Forever 21's clothes. I feel like in my heart that that's a bridge we should cross later, right, Doc? I mean, maybe we should focus on the Crohn's disease or the pancreatitis or the immense body pain, am I right? Then there's always the surgeon you go to see after you get an MRI of your hip. You're already feeling down because sometimes it feels like someone is ripping your hip out of your socket, so the doctors like to make you feel better. One even said to me, well, the fibromyalgia doesn't help. The hip dysplasia doesn't help. And this is when he looks me in the eye and kind of smirks. And being overweight sure doesn't help. So let me get this straight. Being overweight doesn't help. I mean, this whole time I really truly thought it was helping. I mean, that is brand new information. That is eye-opening. I'm gonna have to contact the authorities because you've really cracked the fucking code there. But you know, I think society is right on track with these doctors because they're not the only things getting in the way to my path to awesome self-esteem. There are also online dating sites that sure share that same sentiment. So, you're filling out your profile on OkCupid and you get to the part where it says body type. I love this part, don't you? There are multiple options. Skinny, athletic, fit, curvy, and a little extra. A little extra. Oh, you know Anna. Yes, you do. Brown hair, a little extra. Yes, it was the steroids. They make you ravenous. They make you gain weight no matter what. And the psychiatric meds, they slow down your metabolism. But it was more than that. My weight gain was a tool I used, a self-destructive act, the result of an eating disorder. When I moved to New York in 2013 to work 2 theater jobs, I hit rock bottom, hoarding food into my room so that my roommates wouldn't see, restricting during the day and binging at night, eating my feelings. It was a way to protect myself. Maybe if I got fat, men wouldn't want to touch me anymore. Maybe if I got fat, no one would hurt me ever again. I could blame the high doses of steroids and the psychiatric meds all I wanted, but they weren't the only reason I gained so much weight over the years. Food felt like my only friend. It was there for me no matter what, but food never filled the void in my life. Food never got rid of the depression. It was a vicious cycle. The more I ate, the worse I felt about myself, and the worse I felt about myself, the more I ate. And the more weight I gained, the more I would look at myself in the mirror and wish I would just vanish. I always felt guilty for not being anorexic or bulimic because those disorders seem to be more widely accepted in the eating disorder world. I'd always think to myself, people see fat people and think they're disgusting, but when they see a skinny person, they idolize them. But what I learned in treatment is that no matter how skinny you are, it doesn't equal happiness. But I still felt that shame as I sat at the meal support table at residential treatment and was the only overweight one at the table. Why didn't I want to be skinny? It's because I wanted protection. Protection for me after 2010 was the most important thing, and I didn't even realize it. My PTSD didn't kick in until I was 23 years old. 4.5 years later, and it finally explained it all. Finally explained why I used food as a weapon. It felt like my only weapon. The only thing that could shield me from the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you.
So that beautiful smile that's coming on the screen right now, Anna, is just so worth 1,000 words. I don't know how to say it. That shows how much love you have for the theater, even if you're performing something so challenging and difficult, to put yourself out there on a screen with. We have 72 people with us still, which is half the audience that has stayed to see your performance. So you should feel really blessed. You know, we're on our 3rd hour here. So it's just thrilling to have you here. And I'm sorry to talk about such difficult topics that you've brought up: sexual assault, PTSD, mental health, chronic illness, eating disorders, doctor-patient relationships, and of course doing this through storytelling, and of course demonstrating the need that we have to have empathy and compassion for patients. People are writing in the chat to keep up with this. I think I'm using every sensory skill I have. Wonderful, extraordinary, wonderful, bravo, 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 a real treat. And for all of you, you're only seeing part of this performance. Anna's performance is available full if you want to contact her, and I'm going to make sure she puts in the chat her contact information, even though it was on the initial slides, because we had a full performance with this with a debrief by a psychiatrist at Northwell, and we did this actually more than once, and it was totally well received. So please be in contact with her personally. But now I want to debrief with Anna, as well as the participants that are still with us, the use of theater as a way to teach these very, very challenging presentations that you did in a very brief 15-minute period of time. Thinking about the use of theater, and I'd love some people to verbally unmute yourselves and talk about how you see Anna's performance as a teaching tool for our younger learners, be it residents, be it students, be it fellows, be it other clinicians, nurses in psychiatric medicine. There's a psychiatric nurse practitioner program we have. And then also with pharmacy students, because so much of Anna's life has been consumed by medications, unfortunately, that some have hurt her, some have helped her. So anybody has any comments on this, I'd love people to come forward, either in the chat box, but even more so verbally through voice right now. Janine is saying such a great way to teach empathy and compassion from the voice of a patient. Yes. Physician assistants, I'm apologizing. I don't mean to exclude anyone. Physician assistants have very, very little training in taking care of patients with psychiatric disorders or mental health issues. So they really, really need this advanced education. I am familiar with the physician assistant curriculum, so certainly a group. Anybody comment?
I have a question, Anna. I'm curious, 2 things. One is why you chose theater to tell your story, and what your hope is in sharing this story with the medical world.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Am I unmuted? Is this
Yes, you are. You're
okay?
fine.
Great. Well, I've been acting for over 20 years, so theater has always been the most healing part of my life. It's always been a huge passion of mine, even from when I was really, really young. And so when I was in kind of the darkest part of my world many years ago, and I was in treatment, I was writing journal entries, which kind of led to the show. I kind of dramatized them to create the show. And it kind of felt right using my love in life, which is theater and performance, and the struggles and hardships I had faced. And I guess in terms of performing it for the medical community, it's really about, for me, connecting with other people, figuring out ways to kind of open discussion, especially surrounding mental health and mental illness. I can't tell you how rewarding it's been when I performed to have people come up to me and say things like, that happened to me too, thank you for sharing, or I can't believe someone else was going through this too. My family never spoke about this with me. There are a variety of things that people have come up to me and said, but really making those connections with other people, even if I don't know them, it's this kind of sense of camaraderie and connection that I really value.
So how do you feel that you're here, you're the person, you're the center person here. How did you feel why theater is a way to teach versus some of the other things we've heard about today? They're all important. But normally there's a debrief after your performance. So that's a way, of course, that you teach through the performance. But the actual theatrical piece, I'm more interested in hearing to be a way to heighten awareness, sensitivity, emotions in people. What does theater do that other means does not?
That's a really good question. You know, I don't really know. It's hard for me to explain why I think theater is so powerful. There's something about, especially live, like of course this is such a privilege to be able to do this over Zoom, but when you're actually in the room with a live performer, there's something really special about actually seeing the emotions happen in real time. You know, I love film, I love television, but it's a very different art form. You know, you can say cut and start over. You can edit and kind of manipulate the material to make it come off in a certain way. But with live theater, it's kind of like you're going through the journey moment by moment with the performer, and it's in real time. And I think just the combination of voice and body can be really powerful. You know, as an actor, your body is your instrument, but also your voice is. And the combination of having that physical presence and the emotional presence can be really powerful. So I know I'm quite moved when I see live performance. And I've talked to Lisa about this before, but there's a theory that the reason that live performance can be so moving and powerful is because the sound vibrations that are coming off the performer actually resonate and vibrate in our own bodies. So that's why when we go to a musical concert or see any kind of live performance and we feel this kind of cathartic feeling, or we feel really moved and it's almost like a visceral experience, there is some science behind that. And it's different than maybe just watching a film or Netflix or whatever you might do in your home.
I think that's excellent, that cathartic and emotional connection to words. But when you hear words in music, it's words and it's the melody, and we know music is important. We heard this today so vividly on the webinar about music, but I think it's also, when we see theater, you see body language, you see verbal, you see nonverbal, you see it all in front of you. So I think the power of the sight, and I'm sorry for people who do not see that, you know, they cannot see that. It's sad. So Anna, do you have any theatrical performances that you've seen that influenced you and encouraged you to perform? Next to Normal is one of the best and most powerful things I've seen. So that's a comment for you.
Wait, that is insane that the person wrote that, because I didn't even see that in the chat and I was about to say Next to Normal. I mean, sorry, I was about to say The Normal Heart, sorry. Which just reminded me, like, the same word and the same title. The Normal Heart was a play I saw in DC many years ago, and it came out decades ago. It's about the AIDS, about AIDS, HIV AIDS in the 80s. And that was one of the, I just think of that as a really inspiring performance about something that was not just about an illness and a virus, but also about the mental health component of it. But really what inspired me to perform was Shakespeare at a young age. I saw a Shakespeare performance when I was about 7 years old, and I turned to my mom and I was like, I want to do that. So I started with my Shakespeare training, and that kind of, it grew from there. But I've been most moved by performances that talk about kind of the psyche, which is why I thought of The Normal Heart. It's one thing to talk about, like with my show, it's one thing for me to just talk about that I had Crohn's disease or talk about that I had Lyme or PTSD, but it's like, what are the emotional implications of living with illnesses and how important that is, because it's not about the physical alone, it's about the mind-body connection.
Right. Excellent. A lot of thank yous, and there's a comment by Paul Hated. You know, so often medical students are relegated to a shattering role, seems analogous to the audience in theater. Yeah, nice, Paul, which can be very participatory. I wonder how this could prepare students to be better at shadowing in clinical spaces. This is a fascinating point. How theater can help medical students become better at shadowing in clinical spaces because of the observation they do through theater. Any thoughts on
that? For me?
Yeah. Anybody want to comment? Anna or anybody who's left in the audience?
I was actually going to say that's something I had never thought of before, so I thought that was really interesting to hear. I'm learning more and more with this experience with performing for the medical community that there are so many positive uses of sharing medical journeys with other people, and it just, in ways that I couldn't have even imagined. Like I've been doing this now for a couple of years through Lisa at Hofstra Northwell, and it just has brought so many different opportunities and so many different discussions to happen. So I would be really curious to hear how something like that might kind of manifest.
And you know what's interesting? There is occasionally Broadway shows or shows off Broadway that do add for participation from the audience. So maybe we shouldn't just be shadowing in the audience. So the question, how do faculty deal with students who want to opt out of these sessions because it's hard for them to deal with? We have started putting a disclaimer on our sessions that they may elicit difficult feelings and allow them to opt out for a personal reason. I have a bit of a hard time with this opt-out option because I feel strongly that we as healthcare providers need to be able to be supportive for our patients, no matter what our history, and we need to learn how to deal with these feelings and emotions. So this is really open to anybody, and Anna can comment, but it's really open to anybody still listening. We still have 60 people on. Any comments on opt-out, opt-in?
So I would like to say that, you know, when we offer a program like this with Anna, and we do many programs with live theater because I feel so strongly about the power of it to move people. All of them to date have been optional, extracurricular, and I find that it serves a need for certain students, certain faculty who really need this kind of interaction and this kind of learning. And listening to Paul's presentation before, it does satisfy so many aspects of the prism when you offer a program like this. You know, whatever your reason for attending a program like this, there are a lot of different benefits. But I don't know about compelling attendance at something like this, because I think that it may be difficult for some people to watch.
So I just want to say, you know, I learned something from Rachel Remen about this, Philip. So I don't know if you have Healers Art where you are. So Healers Art is a non-mandatory program. You sign an affidavit when you get trained that you're going to follow all of Rachel Remen's rules. And one of her rules is that the program has to be elective. when I went to the training, she spoke about one medical school that broke the rule. It was a new medical school, I will not give the name, and required her program, and how it failed at that medical school. Because she feels the content of her program, Healer's Art, must be elective for people to opt in. And the minute you make it mandatory, the people who want to do this work will really suffer. So I learned that lesson from her, and I think it's what Lisa's addressing, that certain things are an opt-in. And for the people who are missing out, it's, it's their choice. And we do have some opt-in we do have some required reflection sessions at our medical school, and some students don't like that, but we do require some. But performances like this, I think there is some credibility to keep it as an opt-in. And I learned that well from Rachel Remen.
Yeah, and the other thing about theater is that we also, at the Zucker School of Medicine, use active theater, where we have doctors and students performing together in shows on topics of interest. And that's another way that theater can be a tool for people to develop empathy and to really understand the plight of a patient. So that's another way that we've used theater very effectively.
Any other comments here? We're running close to 5 to 6, so we're just about to end here. If everybody's still on, don't forget to do your evaluation form, and be an opportunity to continue work together. And many people saying we need to do another conference. So if Janine is still on, we need to move forward, more conferences like this, because not only with COVID and social distancing, but the fiscal fallout has canceled travel at most places for the coming year, including our institution. So this is the way to connect without having additional expenses.
I would certainly, for at least I speak for the NEGA, we will be looking very much at how to connect virtually with all of you. Please, when you fill out the evaluation, please enter your comments, suggestions, and we'll be looking at that very carefully. And I want really to take this opportunity again to thank Alice and her wonderful committee, Leanne, and really the presentation were wonderful. The mix of presentation was wonderful, and this final theater experience was also just great. So thank you so much to all of you for joining.
It's interesting. I feel like amazed that each presentation, and it basically, I asked people, do you want to do this, after they were supposed to present at the real conference, and they were also unique and complementary. And then the AAMC ending presentation just pulled it all together. And I just don't, I feel like it was one of those aha moments where, wow, it happened and it worked. And I don't know what I'm going to do myself when this is over right now, but I need to do something physical to really feel the emotion of this. And I want to thank Anna for ending us. Any last comments for Anna? Anything about theater? Anything that you want to say? Anyone out loud or in the chat? Otherwise, we might have closure after this wonderful 3 hours together that went very quickly.
I don't know. I have one thing, if I can speak as a non-medical person. I'm an art museum person. That Anna's performance to me is so profound, because I think of the medical field as people observing their patients outwardly. But what Anna was showing us was the deep, deep, complex life that goes on inside our patients that we often don't have a chance to even think about. So I think thank you, Anna, and Alice and Lisa and AAMC, everybody, for making this one of the richest experiences I've had.
Thank you. And somebody else wanted to speak, I heard in the background. Thank you, Nancy, a dear colleague of mine that I adore. Thank you.
This is Jenny Ariel, and I just want to say, Anna, that students come to medical school excited. They came to change lives and to heal and to have empathy and compassion. And unfortunately, there's so much to learn and so much to do that by the time they leave, I'm afraid they've lost some of that. And I think every medical school student in the world needs to see what it's like to have a doctor hurt instead of heal. And I just thank you so much for this performance. And I thank the conference. It's been one of the best afternoons I've spent. And I'll never want to be in a poster session again that is not presented this way. So I thank all of you.
Thank you. Where are you from? I hear a little bit of an accent.
Maybe a lot. The Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston.
Well, Charleston's a beautiful place, so I hope you can enjoy the outside a little before it gets too hot. And thank you for joining us from there.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I think we might close up, Lisa. What do you think?
I think so. I think this was wonderful.
And reach out, stay in touch, all those wonderful things. And I think it's a great point about finances and what we need to do to reconsider conferences. So we shall see where we go. Thank you.